Good evening, folks. This is The Weird Part, and I am your host, Vincent Trewell. My special guest tonight, appearing for the third time, is Fortean investigator, paranormal aficionado, podcaster, independent filmmaker, and there's probably some other titles that I have missed there. Ashley Hilt. Welcome, Ashley.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back again for a third time. When do I get my letter jacket?
We're going to make some merch, and you'll be the first to have it, okay?
That sounds good.
But no, there should be something though for um, showing
Yeah.
up and doing this and doing it well. And yeah, I look forward to getting. I'm raising this podcast. It's getting upgraded in 2023, and it's
Oh,
going to have
exciting.
merch and thing. Oh, it's. I have some plans in the works, believe me. Um, and you'll definitely be aware of it. Um,
Awesome. Sounds good to me.
yes, cool. Um, let's see. I guess in no particular order here, but you are a researcher and an investigator, a person who actually goes out and looks for things like cryptids. Um, I mostly like read about them and stuff. Rarely do I get out in the field and really look. I have done some of that recently, but you really, that's something that you do regularly.
I
Um,
do. I do. I haven't lately. Living in the Midwest, it can be tough to get outside during the winter months. Typically I refer to the winter as like my business months. Um, but it doesn't completely stop it, because when we do have a fresh snow and when it's good, when it's safe, that's another thing. It's not necessarily always safe to go out when there's a bunch of ice and snow and stuff everywhere, but when it's safe and you've just had a good snow and maybe you're kind of mid melt, it's a really good time to get out there and go look for some footprints. I haven't found any yet, but yeah, you don't downplay reading at all. 99% of my job is reading.
well, and that honestly, yeah, there's a lot to. I mean, you could totally just do research that way.
Oh yeah.
Um, you probably have people contact you though with their strange experiences and take witness reports and stuff.
Absolutely. That is something that I try to find an easy way to utilize it. Some people have websites. I don't, I guess I don't know why. But people for the most part just come directly to me, either in person, especially when you're at events and things like that, and you're a speaker at one of these events, people they just flock to your table just to share the things that they've been through, and it's well appreciated. And I do have like a formal form that people can fill out online, where I'm trying to kind of direct all of my eyewitness encounters over there, just so I have a place that I can go back and reference, and people can choose whether or not they would like me to investigate it. If I'm not in the area, then I'll find somebody that's in your area to come, that I trust to come investigate your particular situation. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely had things happen locally. We've got a property that we're looking forward to investigating here in the spring, which is going to have some interesting results. Probably the most active property that I've had so far. So yeah, I get out there. I do the damn thing.
Indeed, indeed. I was wondering if you had any particular interesting ones that you have going on right now, or kind of a slower time of the year.
Like I said, it's definitely a lot slower time of year. But there are certain areas that I want to get into. Some things have kind of popped up on my radar. I actually live um probably about, I mean, less than 3 miles away from a big, I guess, a reserve area. And I had never really put much stock into it until I had found out that another group, I don't want to name them because personally I don't like the people in
No,
it, but
no,
another group of
they're not.
people.
They're not going to get any free advertising here.
Yeah, I'm not going to give it to them. But they had caught some strange howls and things in that area. And then when you
Hmm.
look at that property on a map, and you kind of track where all it goes, and how far it extends, I mean, you have these areas in Ohio where you just hit nothing but trees. And it's that way throughout the entire state. And so, I mean, and what I mean is like there's this big um, path of wilderness that just connects everything to everything. And it's part of that area. And I never really had thought about, hitting that area up because it's got a hiking trail. I mean, it's nice. People take their families there.
Mhm.
Um, but the deeper you get into it, I suppose there could be some things to find. So I have been out and about in that area. I have been kind of utilizing the Dogman lore, which is kind of an interesting subject that
Oh, it's fascinating. Please.
yeah, it's a strange one. And I don't necessarily know how much of the talk of the town that I personally subscribe to, which is why I'm deep diving it myself. So that's been, that one's a little easier because I don't have to go, I don't have to venture out 2 to 5 hours away
Yes,
and,
yes.
plan a weekend and things. I can just go, which is nice. But throughout that whole area is actually, it connects all into, if anybody's familiar with Ohio at all, then they'll kind of know what I'm talking about. But it connects into like the Salt Fork area, which is like Bigfoot country.
Mm.
I mean, again, there's endless stuff. And then all of that tracks up into the Cuyahoga Nature Reserve in Ohio, which has a very interesting history. As a matter of fact, the scariest Mothman story that I have is from there. And
Really?
oh yeah, and
Um,
it's interesting.
if and I realize this, we're just kind of talking off the top of
Sure.
our heads here, but like I haven't heard an Ohio Mothman story.
Oh.
What do you mind telling us that?
And this was North Ohio. Yeah. When I first got into all this, I was a marketing specialist for Victoria's Secret. I didn't have a weird job. I was just kind of helping somebody make a YouTube video about the Mothman, and then
No
it turned
comment
into
on whether
this.
that's a weird job or not, but go ahead.
No, it was great. I got to like it was like encouraged for us to go into the office and fondle mannequins. It was pretty fantastic. But then my life changed. So but anyway, so again, when I started the Mothman research, it wasn't a big deal. And I had no social media footprint at all. But one of the first things that I did, just kind of for funsies, I put a post out on social media and I'd ask people, hey, has anybody seen the Mothman? And it's just like, old coworkers and like my actual friends and family, people I knew back when my
Uh-huh.
social media was just like people I knew. um, but anyway, so one of my old bosses from one of my old jobs she says, yeah, I've seen it and my mom's seen it too. And I'm
Wow.
like, oh, really? So I get a hold of her. She's like, yeah, here, call me. So I call her, talked to her for a good bit. She told me that she had seen the Mothman. They lived in this area of town, which, again, kind of borders that kind of wilderness weirdness here in Ohio. And she said that she saw him standing like at the tree line. And it was just a black figure with glowing red eyes, and they were scared, and they were teenagers, so they ran in the house. The mom said that she had seen him twice. One time she saw him casually walking down the street, going on a stroll. His,
And he's with the full wings and the whole 9 yards.
and he was more like a mist. She said it
Huh.
was like a kind of a misty, kind of strange, smoky figure. But
Mhm.
yes, wings and full body, but no like details to any of it. And then she also said she opened her garage one morning and was getting the car ready. So she had opened the garage door from inside the house, started the car, and then proceeded to go out into the garage to get in the car. Well, when she opened up the door from the home to the garage, um, it was in there,
Oh
laying.
dear God.
It was upside down, hanging upside down from the rafters, and wrapped up like a bat. And she said it was probably about 6 to 7 feet tall. At which point she turned around and she, waited a while to leave and eventually left.
Nope, nope,
That's
nope.
not the scary story though. Those aren't the scary ones. So
That's not that's about the scariest damn thing. Okay.
no, 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 no.
Go ahead,
So,
please.
yeah, I mean that's pretty horrifying. But yeah, no, that wasn't it. So she starts talking to me about all kinds of stuff. I mean, just kind of chit chatting about high strangeness and all kinds of things. And she was like, "Well, do you know about Helltown?" And I'm like, "What? Huh? What's that? I don't know what." Now, I kind of did know about Helltown a little bit. Okay, Helltown is actually Boston Township, Ohio. Okay, Travel Channel did a really, really bad documentary about it. It's not, it's a mockumentary. It just tells this tale about how there's a Wendigo there and these teenagers
Shocked,
were killed
shocked,
by
I
it.
tell you
And
that Travel Channel
exactly.
would produce less than the
Yes.
finest in entertainment.
Yeah. It was, I mean, it makes for some okay entertainment, but it's
Oh,
not,
I love mountain monsters.
it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's just so ridiculous. Like people actually act like this. No, they don't. They're paid to act like that. But
Yes, yes. And yes, they have guns, but there's no way they're ever allowed to have
no,
bullets.
not those people.
No. And I always got the impression that they're filming this in the deep woods and they're like 100 feet from like a gas station. You
Yeah,
know, that's
exactly. Like the Blair Witch Project, right? They're
yes,
just right
yes.
there. But anyway, so if you've heard of Helltown, Ohio, Helltown, USA, it's from that documentary, but it is a local legend. I mean, it's got a bunch of weird stuff. So Helltown, a little bit of backstory of what it actually is. Back in the 70s, the government purchased Boston Township and kicked all the residents out. And the
Oh, wait.
reason,
I'm
oh,
sorry.
no, it's
I'm
okay.
just gasping because yes, I've totally seen that. And I
Yes.
actually once I accepted that it was a work of fiction, I found it very entertaining. But as long as you accept that it's complete
Yes.
beyond pro wrestling level fiction,
Yes,
it's
right. Well, that
it.
part of it's true. Okay, so that really did happen. So the government did
Oh,
purchase
okay.
Boston Town. Okay, so this is the true story. Okay, of Boston Township, of Helltown. So the government did purchase that property and did kick the residents out, and they did it so that they could expand the reserve up there, Cuyahoga Reserve, and so and that was the whole point. Now, it is odd. It is very strange. Boston Township was the oldest village in Ohio, and it wasn't dying. It was thriving at the time. So it was weird because that could have been the perfect tourist spot for people to stay and then go into the reserve. It's in the reserve. I mean, it would have been great for that. So it was strange, but the government does these things. It happens. Well, people have since then made up all kinds of crazy legends about it. There's all kinds of stuff. There's a satanic church there, which is a church with an upside down cross. It's not there now. They've torn it down, but it was there for a while. And that was a real thing. But it was the architecture at the time when they had made it. That's what they look like. There was an old abandoned bus there where
It was a
allegedly
real church, but
it was a real church
it was
with
not a
an upside
satanic
down
church.
cross, but not a satanic church. Right.
Yes, and
Right.
I'm sorry, just I'm kind of being a know-it-all here, but people sometimes don't realize that the upside down cross is also known as the cross of Peter, the disciple
Exactly.
who
Exactly.
was also crucified and said, "No, I will not be crucified the same way as my Lord. Put me upside down." And
Yes.
I mean, that is the Catholic story of St. Peter.
Yeah.
So it's not automatically evil. And very few people build a church to say we hate God. That doesn't.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So it was just a regular church, but
It was
they
just a
torn
church,
down.
but yeah, people were like, "Oh, it's a satanic church. They do rituals there." And now there is weird stuff that happens there. Don't get me wrong, it does seem very odd, but you don't really know what's what, especially with the kids that go down there now. I mean, especially now, people go down there and do messed up things. There's like a barn, there's like an old abandoned barn there with a noose hanging in it, which is weird. But again, teenagers, and you'll
We have
go
a
there
similar place
and they're,
in
oh, go
where
ahead.
I'm sorry. We have a similar place in Wisconsin called the Kettle Moraine, which is a big nature preserve, and life imitates art. People do, usually the younger teenage high school crowd, do
Sure.
go out there and do their idea of rituals sometimes
Right.
because they've heard that people do that, so they go and do it. So it's yeah,
Yeah.
I get where you're
Yeah.
coming from.
Well, right, exactly. That's Helltown. So anyway, so and there's an old cemetery there. I mean, again, everything that you could ask for in an urban legend, it is there. Okay, so back to my story. Okay, so the mom's asking me if I know about Helltown. She was like, "Look, I'm gonna invite you over. I'm gonna invite somebody over, and you got to talk to them." I'm like, "Okay." So she does. She invites me over. I go to their house. We have a cookout, just a normal everyday cookout, and nobody's really talking about anything weird the whole time. And we're like getting towards the end of the night, and everything's kind of calming down, and we're all like sitting around outside. And this gentleman that she had there, she looks at him and she goes, "Tell her the story." And this man, I mean, his complete demeanor changed. I mean, it was crazy to watch his whole entire face just like melt away from itself. And he goes, "What story?" But
I
he knew. He knew
think you know what we're
exactly.
talking about. That's good.
Yeah. And that's what she said. "Come on, you know what story." And he kind of, looks at me, looks at her, looks around the room. He goes, "Okay." Says, "So I used to be a park ranger for the Cuyahoga Nature Reserve. And back in the 70s, there was Boston Township and it kicked all these people out, and blah, blah, blah. We heard the story. I told this already. He said, so at the time, one of the things that they wanted them to do working there was to really keep an eye out on the town itself. The residents were pissed off about being kicked out of town, rightfully so. So they were worried about people vandalizing the property. Um, Ohio is a bit too moist for a forest fire, but they were worried about it. They didn't want anything like that to happen. So anyway, so he's out patrolling the town, and nothing weird's going on there. It's fine. Well, he's walking the perimeter of the town, and he hears some strange noises in the distance, and he's kind of following them. And when he's following them, he comes upon a giant chain link fence that he has never seen before. And this fence, he says, was about 10 feet tall. And so he starts walking the perimeter of the fence, trying to find out how to get into it. And eventually he comes upon like a clearing that he could see through. And he said, what I saw, he was very upset. He's like, what I saw changed my life. He said, you ever seen Jeepers Creepers? I said, yeah. He said, it looked like that. And I'm like, okay. He's like, there was like a Jeepers Creeper standing there, and in the center and around it were these men dressed up in like military garb. And he says, and I don't know why I think this, but it's like they were under an electrical attack. And
Wow.
so he said that he walked out off the job and never went back ever again, never went back to work after that. So
That seems a very reasonable response at that point.
yes.
That's cool. I'm not waiting for the pension. I am done.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, no, thank you. Walked off, never went back. And well, I then also, after, hearing all this, left, and I was very scared. This was, again, I was very, very new in the Mothman research. When I started all this, I was a skeptic. I didn't believe in any of this to begin with. I didn't even really believe in Mothman at the time. At that time, I didn't. But I watched this grown man who had never met me before, had no horse in the race. He wasn't sitting there getting interviewed for a documentary. Tell me the story, and watch his face tell me the story, and watch his body tell me it. Um, it scared me, and I went straight to my best friend's house, and I was like, "Look, I don't think I can do this. I think I just learned something that I'm not supposed to know." And what does that mean? I mean, you hear all these stories of people getting offed by the government, the men in black, and I was like, am I going to be one of those people? Is that I don't want to be I don't want to be a martyr for the paranormal,
No, I fully hear you.
And she was just like, well, you don't have to do it, but if you don't tell these stories, who will? And I definitely thought about it, and then that's when I got really, really heavy into the research at that point. And obviously, I've told that story so many times on so many different shows, and I'm still here. So what does that mean? I don't know. And I'm not a big like government conspiracy person. I don't really like buy into the fact people are like, oh, the government's covering up cryptids. I don't think they are.
I
But
tend not to think that either. I was
yeah,
going to ask if anybody ever did approach you then and say, "Hey, don't mention this stuff about Helltown."
never.
But okay, never happened. Huh.
Never has. Nobody's ever approached me about anything. So it's either I'm like dead wrong about everything, or the government really isn't involved. You know what I mean? Like,
Or a third option, maybe even if they are involved, because I mean, there's like soldiers there or something. Um, if you're talking about it, where you're one voice among 1,000 others saying
right.
something, why focus on this person? Let them all
Yeah.
talk, and nobody will know. Nobody will be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. So
Yeah.
I don't.
Just
I don't think the silencing really. I have, and I'm just not to get too far away from the story that you're telling, but I don't think a lot of the silencing is really silencing, because so many people who have been approached by MIB, even in the full, the full manifestation, the
Yeah,
full suit and tie and dark glasses and acting weird and driving a 1950s Cadillac and all that,
sure.
they almost like they don't get killed or anything. They don't
They
die.
don't. Yeah.
They get told there's going to be big consequences, and then nothing happens.
And then there's never big consequence. Well, that's because then they
Yes,
go and tell everybody that they saw the Men in Black, and they're like, well, now if we kill this person, they're gonna know.
yes. Also, though, I wonder if sometimes, like I did a early podcast on the typology of the Men in Black. I think there are some who are government agents that really are investigating something.
I came on your show and talked about the Men in Black.
Yes, yes. And there are some who are just amplifying it.
Yeah.
We told you not to tell about this. Oh, that means it must be real. And so they get a false story out there by telling people not to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think that does happen.
Exactly. Right. Like I said, then they go and tell everybody, and then they're like, well, that's your best defense. You need to tell everybody about
Yeah. Oh,
every experience that
yes.
you have, because that's going to save you.
I wrote a book totally non-paranormal by a guy who was I think it was New York Times. He's a professional journalist for decades. And one of the things he did was cover the mafia. And he said, my biggest protection was I put everything out there. And so they never really threatened me, because they knew if anything happened to me, who to look for. Because
Yeah.
I tell it all, and that way that's more of a protection than a liability.
Yeah, then you're just, you're telling on yourself. You're like,
Yes,
oh,
exactly.
well, I wonder who killed that guy. It couldn't be the mafia, You'd think they'd protect him even harder. The guy comes down with terrible financial ruining illnesses. They'd fund it all. Like, no,
Probably get a bag of cash or something.
Yeah.
We don't want anything to happen to him,
Hand it right to the doctor. We got doctors for that. Exactly. And I think, well, right. That's assuming if the Men in Black are government agents, then they're not very good at their job. Even if they're not government agents, they're not very good at whatever
well, I think
whatever it
there's also
is.
people who are pretending to be government agents.
Agreed.
Who just sometimes people are just weird and they like to go freak out other people.
Yeah.
And there are some who are like, in fact, I know somebody who did this when they were much younger, but had these UFO investigator like badge like thing they could flash and give the impression they were a government agent, and then get people to talk to them.
That's a good.
And I don't try this at home, but yes, I have heard of people doing that. And I'm from the American National UFO Investigation Service, which is just a private club of you and two other people. And you flash this thing, and people think, well, I can report this to this FBI agent, which as long as you don't distinctly say you are that. Some people do that. I would not recommend
laminator. I think I could sell some of these at some of my tables. And
hey, anybody wearing a lanyard ID must be an authority figure.
Absolutely, obviously, that's how that works. But yeah, so yeah, that's the scariest Mothman story that I have personally. That sounds horrifying to me.
Oh, and, it does.
I think that the electrical attack is very interesting. Verbiage, because it just shows me how ignorant that person is to the phenomena.
I mean, like, did he think the creature was like shocking the soldiers with like bolts of electricity? Or
I think that what he was like trying to portray was that it was staving them off somehow with some type of probably telekinetic attack, or was controlling them in some type of way. And I think that the only way he could really describe it is through electricity. I'd like to talk to him again. Now that I know more, I definitely, I've been meaning to, touch base and talk to him again. But I don't know, maybe he won't talk to me now because I'm somebody. I don't know. I don't want to push that limit, I guess. But hey, I guess it doesn't hurt to ask. I might as well try. Because
I,
then the
I
pandemic happened, and you don't want to
mhm.
bother older people during the pandemic. That just wasn't
Oh
good.
man. That was
You
needless to
know,
say, that was a real drag. Yes, yes.
let me sit down with you, and then I don't want to be like, hey, I know you're terrified of this thing, but come on my documentary, let's talk about it. But maybe he
Let's talk
would.
about the worst day of your life for an
Right.
hour or two, you know.
I'll come talk to you about it again. Now, most people that I do, most of my witnesses, I do curate a type of relationship with. We typically have an ongoing friendship, really. Because I want them to trust me. Because you find out the more you get to know somebody that typically they don't just have the one experience. Usually there's more. And so I've tried to, continue. And again, the more they trust you, the more they'll come out with something or they'll be like, well, I didn't think I should mention this. I didn't think it mattered. They'll think it's something small, and I try to tell them, don't force anything. If you remember anything, tell me. That's cool, but don't try to force it. Um, Sometimes they'll call me and they'll be like, there is a UFO outside right now. And some of these people are local. So then I get to pull a good old fashioned John Keel and Gray Barker and go chase after it and go see if it's out there. Usually it's not by the time I get there, but still gonna try. So
I'm just laughing because just stick to John Keel. You don't need to be Gray Barker.
I don't need to be just Keel.
Because then I can send you like a weird postcard and play mind games with you when you don't
Yes,
need it. You
someone needs
know?
to. Yeah, I'm not getting my disembodied weird phone calls yet. That hasn't happened.
Exactly.
And I'm a
And that
little offended. So
I had real mixed feelings about Gray Barker because he did some very interesting things, wrote some fascinating material, but he also, for lack of a better term, fucked with John Keel when Keel
a
was like
lot.
paranoid as hell.
Yeah.
And, Keel had had some things happen that were not, people showing up in his house and stuff that were not Gray Barker. And then Gray Barker is calling up on the phone like, it's like, that doesn't help, man. Okay. I'm going through this thing.
So rude.
It is. And it's like, really, did you have to do that crap? Because you did some of that. And, he's already going through some things, some of which may have been the government, some of which may have been God knows what.
Who
And then
knows?
you're just,
Yeah.
poking him a little bit. And it's like, that didn't rub me the best way.
You either in this field, I feel like you either grow up to be Gray Barker, who ended up being actually very skeptical.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sure.
or you end up growing up to be John Keel, who ended up kind of being nuts. There's no like in between. You end up being one of those two. So
Yeah. Well, Keel was very intense.
he
And
was.
he felt like man, that is one person who I really regret not talking with
Oh yeah.
while he was alive because I got into his stuff a few years before he died, but I should have like done whatever it took to get to New York City and talk to him, even if he was in, the later stages of being a very grouchy old man. I don't care, um, it would have been fascinating to talk with him.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
some of his stuff on YouTube from when he was somewhat younger is amazing.
Oh yeah.
Do you ever see him on the David Letterman show?
No, I don't think so.
It's on YouTube, and Letterman, who could be, obviously very sarcastic and cutting, treats him with complete respect, and he really, you know, talks for a while. They give him like a half hour of just Q&A, and he talks about everything, Bigfoot and aliens and what have you. And it's a really good, it's something anybody should look up and check out because it's very well done.
Yeah, he definitely had I mean, he had the gift of gab. He was really good at talking to people and putting it all in a perspective that you can understand. He when he wrote how the same way he talked. And so even like reading his books, some of them, if you just read just the synopsis of the books and you feel intimidated by picking one of them up, don't. I mean,
Oh
just do it.
no.
They're very easy to understand. It's not techno babble and bullshit. I mean, they're actual words and they actually kind of makes sense. Now, I don't agree with every single thing Keel ever wrote, and some of his
Oh
stuff
no.
is outdated, and we know that now.
Mm.
But he was definitely, I mean, he's still, I mean, that's where I started was John Keel research. And I was like, I want to be John Keel when I grow up. And so
I
that's what
hear you.
that's what I've
Hey,
been working
I
towards.
he was my third, like aspirational figure. When I grew up, I wanted to be Leonard Nimoy on In Search of.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Um, okay, now I realize I'm quite a bit older than you, but that was on from like ages 6 to 14 for me. So it was like really, formative. Wow, this guy just goes and investigates these mysteries all over the world. And it was fascinating. And I wanted to be Leonard Nimoy. And I could tell the difference, even as an early age, between the character Mr. Spock, who he's
Right.
acting, and the real Leonard Nimoy, who's actually going around and looking at this stuff. And I'm like, wow. And he blew my mind many times with that. And at ages 6 to 14. So that's a formative time. And
Sure.
then when I was an adult, I had a job that required a security guard job at night. So it required me to be awake and like fill out certain things at certain times, but
I
not
know where you're
really
going with this.
do very much. So I started listening to Coast AM.
Yep.
Yes, yes. And I wanted to be Art Bell.
Yeah.
And I'm like, especially in the Art Bell era, after Art, I'm not trashing any of the people who've taken up after him, but he was to me the real Coast to Coast AM.
Yeah.
And
There's nothing like it. I mean,
no, not at all. And I wanted to do that. How do I do that? And I didn't have any radio background or entertainment background, but I knew what I wanted to do, and it was pretty much that.
yeah.
And then when I was a little older adult, not that old, but they re-released the Mothman prophecies because of the Richard Gere movie,
Yeah.
which is okay. It's a good movie. I see it. I've seen it several times. It's okay, but it's maybe 10% of what's in the book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've tried to watch it. I always, whenever I go on any of these shows, we'll talk about it for a minute. I'm always like, it's awful. It's really bad. Well, recently I went on an episode and I just talked about Mothman. And what's crazy is that, honestly, for being somebody that researches a lot of Mothman, I don't talk about a lot of Mothman. Usually I go on like people's shows and they're like, oh my God, you know about other things besides Mothman. And we just go into the rabbit hole and start talking, So, but I'd gone on a show and we just talked about Mothman. And, I was like, they were like mentioning something about what happened in the Mothman. They're like, oh, that's where they got that from. And then they got this thing from that movie, or the movie got this from the book. And I'm like, maybe I should watch it again. I haven't watched it stuff heavily researched. But I just remember it being awful.
And I saw them as two separate things.
Yeah,
If
sure.
you can totally separate that this is just a movie very loosely based
Yeah.
on the book. But as I'm fond of saying, when something says based on a true story, that always reminds me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Yeah.
which was based on a true story, except it didn't happen in Texas. There was no chainsaw, and it wasn't a massacre. So other than that, it was based on a true story. That's a pretty elastic term.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they usually say that movie was based on a guy named Ed Gein who lived in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and so he didn't live in Texas. There's no chainsaw involved,
No.
and he was more of a grave robber and serial killer, but he didn't like massacre anybody. So
No. The only thing that was really the same was the skin wearing. It was
yeah,
that's
that
really
was
it.
the link. Yes, yes. But
That's
yeah. But
but
I go ahead.
no, but yeah, I agree. Those are definitely all people that are, I think, influential to a lot of us. You mentioned Keel being very intense. Well, one of the highlights of my career, one thing that I did get to do, that not everybody can say they've done, is I got to hold the ashes of John Keel.
Oh wow.
And it was, I mean, every bit of intense as you can imagine. I mean, but that could have just been me and my bias knowing what I had in my hands. But it was a very interesting
Okay.
experience. And as a
How
matter of
did
fact, hold on.
this end up happening?
So I held them out right in front of the Mothman statue. Okay. So it was just it was a very interesting situation. I know somebody, I can't say who it is,
No, no, I
because
don't want to put you on the spot, but it just
yeah,
I didn't expect to hear that. Okay.
one of
No.
the family members
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
didn't want, well, one of the family members didn't want the ashes parted out. And so, they don't publicize this person is not a family member, but they've met Keel and talked to him. And but they ended up getting some of the ashes from one of the family members. Because yeah, anyway, like I said, that yeah, somebody had religious things and they just wanted to keep them together. But yeah, I got to hold his ashes, and that was it was something. It was something else. Now, like I
I
said,
bet.
there's tons of things that I don't agree with him. But I
Oh,
can't
yes,
act like
yes.
he's not important to what I do. And
Mhm.
so, I still respect the hell out of him as a researcher, and I always will, and an investigator, because I mean, yeah, he was very much on it. I mean, like I said, I tell, the stories of me trying to go out and chase these sightings as they're happening. I mean, that's what Keel did, and he was out
Oh,
there.
yeah. And so many of his things that I find most fascinating didn't really involve directly, at least, the Mothman.
No.
All the weird people that and I say people almost with quotation marks around it, but the apparently normal people, not normal, but not like they're human beings, apparently, who would show up and like screw with people and do like some sort of mission that nobody else can figure out what the hell it is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, he had a lot of really intense experiences. And he knew his shit. He knew what he was talking about. I mean, he at least tried to um, test theories and things like that against himself. And he tried to deliver honest research for what he had available at the time. I know one thing that it kind of gets a bit controversial in the community is his Wednesday phenomena theory,
Oh,
where
yeah.
he tested, he had over 900 UFO sightings, and he found that they commonly happen on Wednesday, which is why my show comes out every Wednesday. On Wednesdays we talk weird. But yeah, so we know now that that's not accurate, but he did not know that. He only had that pool to test from, that not those 900, and out of those 900, guess what? Well, that's what happened. Good direction. It's a good direction, but just like with all science, you learn and you evolve and you grow. Now we know that UFO sightings mostly happen on the weekends. Um, but actually, here's what we do know: Saturday is number one, and Wednesday is number two. So he wasn't far off.
And I would wonder, is that because there's more UFOs or is it because people have more free time
Yeah.
and are
Yeah.
out late at night, you
Yeah. How,
know?
how do we test that? Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
One thing that I had looked at for a long time was kind of how this stuff was happening. We try to map everything, things that we come across, and anywhere. You should see all my books. All my books, I take a highlighter, every single one of them. And if there is a date and a place, it's highlighted and it's added to the map. And every
Wow,
single
that's
teeny tiny encounter. Yeah.
mhm.
And it's actually a Google Maps thing that I mean, I have between me and my research partner, and I add it there. But then I met this gentleman. His name's Jeff Craig, and he's awesome. He puts out this map. Most people would know it by the map in black. He also does the Hidden Ohio map. It's basically it's a giant full size map of high strangeness. If you get the full map in black, it's across the United States. If you get the Ohio map, it's across Ohio. But he is a cartographer. He actually works for the local utility company,
Oh,
one of
wow.
these in Ohio. That's what he does. And I talked to him about it, because one thing that I noticed about this map thing is that you go down the East Coast and it's just flooded with high strangeness, all the way up until, up through the Midwest, and then you kind of get like the central. There's really not, there's some, okay, but it's definitely dwindling. And then you get really smack dab in the middle of the country, and there's really a bunch of nothing going on. I mean, there's some things here and there. Then the closer you get back to the west again, it starts peppering in heavy again. So I
Hmm.
was like, well, that's interesting. People might have seen that meme around where it's like the Bigfoot sightings compared to like the national parks, and people are like, oh, there's something there. Well, I mean, that makes sense because Bigfoot lives in parks, but Um, so there should be. But when I asked Jeff about it, because I'm like, well, obviously there's something going on here, right? There's a pattern. We can see it. He goes, well, I guess so, but also less people live in the middle of the United States, so you have less reports. And I'm like,
I didn't want to be the, throw cold water on what you were saying, but that's what I was thinking is
that's what it
maybe
is.
it's just less reports because there's fewer people in the rural environment. And also, there may be a little more social stigma coming
Yes.
forward and saying, I saw this,
Yeah,
especially if this is
exactly.
something really weird,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and and I have to accept that. I wouldn't be good at my job if I didn't look at all of the evidence in a scope like that. I have to be able to disprove myself because when I can't disprove something, that's when it becomes interesting. So I always have to look at the possibilities. Is that a weather balloon or is it something from another planet? I don't. And if it's not a weather balloon, then oh, okay. Well, now we're on to something. Was that a bear that you saw? Oh, it wasn't. Okay, well, let's move forward. So but you have to do that. And I think sometimes that can be a little controversial. There are some researchers in this community that I am very skeptical of. I guess I won't get into it so much on, well, oh no, you know what? I will. It's fine. I don't mind. I'm not ashamed.
Go ahead.
But the Chicago Mothman sightings, I'm skeptical of them. And it's not because I don't necessarily trust the researchers. It's not that at all. As a
Oh,
matter
no,
of
no,
fact,
that's not.
right,
Go ahead.
Tobias Whalen, I love him. I love the
Oh,
guy. I love what
absolutely.
he
I
does.
totally respect what he does.
Love his research. I'm very happy to share and all that with him. I'm happy to get him on a case of a Mothman sighting up in that area because he's there and I could do that. It's specifically, very specifically, the reports coming right out of the O'Hare Airport, um, which is strange to me. My co-host for my show is a Chicago native. He lives there and knows plenty of people that work at that airport. And we have been trying for a very long time to find other people that work at the airport. Not just to, see if they've seen the Mothman, just to ask, what are the people that work there talking about? What are they talking about? What's the girl at the coffee place at the airport? What has she heard about this thing? Because it turns out we're not finding anybody that works at the airport that's ever heard about this thing. And that's strange. Again, my co-host.
It certainly is. I can say, having worked at a major airport for a couple of years, things go around. It's like a little
It
city
does.
unto itself. And if
Exactly.
something really weird's happening, everybody from the barista
They don't
to
know.
the cops to the taxi drivers are
Right.
all kind of aware of it.
Yeah, and so we've been trying. So I'm like, okay, well, that's the only thing that I can do because a lot of these sightings, they just oddly enough seem to always happen via correspondence email. They're always anonymous, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand people that want anonymity. I have people like that, but it doesn't actually happen a lot. You'd be surprised how many times people are fine with their identity being disclosed. So it's interesting. Again, my co-host, not only is he a Chicago native, he's an engineer for the city, I mean, part of the city. And he
Mm-hmm.
talks to other engineers. He's got engineer friends at the airport. They're all in a union. And none of
Mm-hmm.
them know anything about this thing, and
Yes. And
that's weird.
I don't know if you're aware of this, and I hope I'm attributing this correctly. I believe that I am. If I'm not, anyone can feel free to correct me. I believe it was AP Strange who looked into the Chicago Mothman
Mhm.
and pretty much definitively showed that it was large birds, like cranes, because we have some enormous birds come from Wisconsin with
Oh,
sandhill
sure.
cranes, and they're gigantic. I once was taking my son to a football game he was playing in, and we got out in the country and took a wrong turn and came upon a farm of sandhill cranes. And it wasn't a paranormal experience, but it was good for scaring the hell out of you. Okay, suddenly these gigantic birds, they're the size of fucking ostriches, come charging, and there's like 80 of them. And did I take a picture of my phone on my phone? Of course I didn't,
No.
because I didn't think of it at the time. But yes, but we know sandhill cranes are real, and
Yeah.
we know that while they're endangered, they're also very much alive. And I think it was AP Strange that put together a pretty comprehensive presentation that what was being seen in Chicago was almost certainly large birds.
I would like to check that out. I was not aware
I
that they
think
had done that.
I think it's on Conspiranormal.
I'm gonna take a look. Yeah,
Now
I'm just ready to
I'm
write
remembering
off.
that
Oh, go ahead.
if I recall correctly,
Yeah, yeah.
but I
I'm
think it
ready to
was
completely write them off. Some of the sightings that were there in and around the town itself, not the airport, but everything outside of the airport seems to check out, and so I'm just skeptical of the airport sightings. You had the one group of people that were up there, and some of them saw this thing and some didn't. You had it where people saw it jump off the top of the building and fly off, and some people saw it and some people didn't.
hmm.
But the reason why I'm not willing to write it off is because I don't believe that there are I don't think flaps are real. I don't think flaps actually happen.
Oh,
I
that's an
I
interesting
Okay,
take.
well,
I
I'll
have
get
not heard
into
that
it for a
before. Go
second.
ahead.
I have
Yeah,
a great
please.
theory. The case that I like to use a lot that makes it very obvious is the Withbull UFO flap. So in Withbull, West Virginia, or not West Virginia, but Withbull, Virginia, um, people would see these UFOs there and with such regularity that you could go out to this spot at this time and there would be UFOs. I mean, it was constant. You had constant reports. Well, most of the hype with it wasn't always that way. It had started when a reporter had checked the police I never remember the name for it, but check
The
what the
blotter?
police were doing. Yes, the blotter. Yes, thank you. Because that's what reporters do, to report their news. And they had seen a report of a UFO, and it's a small town, so they just decided to report on it. Well, people then started reporting UFO sightings directly to him. And then he just kept writing about it because it was selling papers and it was doing well. Well, I mean, then this thing kind of got out of hand. The reason why it got out of hand was because people were seeing UFOs in the same regularity that you see UFOs. It's just that now they had somebody they could tell this to. And when you look at these flaps, it happens all the time. Guess what? With Mothman, that's what happened. It got picked up by the media. People had Mary Hyre. They could go to her and tell her the story. Or John Keel was there frequently. They would go directly to him and tell him. They finally had somebody that would listen. And we see that the Michigan Dog Man, when that DJ put that song out about the Michigan Dog Man,
Yes, yes.
well, guess what? He started getting a flood of reports of Dogman sightings, and then that's what really started it. It's not that people aren't seeing these things, or it's not that these things like kind of live in a space for a certain amount of time. It's that this stuff is always happening, always. It's just people don't know who to call. There's no Ghostbusters.
That
So
no, that makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. And that, kind of turns on its head the whole idea of flaps, which is a pretty accepted thing in,
yeah,
the paranormal world, but maybe it's going on all the time
yeah,
and it's about access rather than it's about the phenomena.
yeah. I
That
believe so. There's always a lead researcher in these things. And it's not an accident as to why. Again, they have somewhere to go. Um, but so I believe that when it started happening in the Chicago area, maybe a couple of other people had seen something strange. They were reporting it, a little heavily. And then Chicago's big, things move quickly there. It just kind of moved out, and now, again, I'm not going to completely write off the O'Hare Airport sightings, but I need another resource to back that up with. I need somebody that's there working at the airport that knows something somewhere, just anybody. And I keep putting it out on social media every little bit. Hey, share this thing. Do you know anybody that works at the airport? And that's all I want to know. Just, do you know anybody? Have them talk to me. It's not going to be weird. They don't have to tell me the life story. I just want to know what they've heard around the water cooler, and that's it.
yes, no, that's a really good approach. That is interesting. Now, I do have to say one thing about airports is that they have the most cameras of anything in the
Yes,
world. So there should be something,
something.
and it's not, you know, there should be video evidence. And I know there's problems with photographing or video, recording paranormal phenomena. There are always problems.
Right.
Hell, there's problems just photographing real things that we know for sure exist on my website. Well, not on my website, on my Facebook post.
Yeah.
There's those two lights, and that's from a local airport that I live nearby, and a small one, not the major one. But that looks totally different in real life.
Yeah.
The photograph doesn't capture what it really looks like.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a very diminished view, but still, at a major airport, there should be something. There should be some photographic record of something that at least looks like a thing flying.
Just something else besides, hey, I got this anonymous email from this person that I can't name, and it
Yes.
just got that airport employs like 30,000 people or something crazy. I mean, it's a town in and of
Oh,
itself.
yes.
You
O'Hare's
know,
enormous.
right. There's somebody somewhere. If this is happening, they're talking about it, and nobody's talking about it. And that's suspicious to me. But I'm not, I'm not doing it to be mean. I'm not doing it to
Oh,
be
no, no.
edgy. I'm doing it because I wouldn't be a very bad investigator if I didn't do it this way. And people don't like that, and this kind of, in the community so far, right now you got people that want the story, right? They want the scary story. And
Yes.
that's okay, but that's not why I'm here.
Yes, yes. And sometimes that can be really awkward when, you know, you have people telling you things that can't possibly be true. And
Yes.
they're not maybe telling you, but they're telling someone else who's accepting their view. And it's, no, that didn't happen. Your dad didn't shoot Bigfoot, and then the FBI showed up and took him away. No,
Yes.
that didn't fucking happen. Okay,
It just didn't
and
happen.
we can agree to disagree, but that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, and I try to be really open minded, but
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
that doesn't mean that I don't have a bullshit detector.
Well,
And
yeah,
you gotta
exactly.
have you gotta have both. I think
It was
to
Tobias who said this to me, but I know he ripped it from somebody famous. I can't remember who. But it's keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. And
there you go.
we
Yes,
we
yes.
have to, we have to get that into some. If we ever want to be taken seriously as a science, that's how we have to be. And I just have to keep pushing, and not to say that I'm not popular or whatever, but some of the
Oh
I've
hell,
ran
Ashes, you're popular as hell. You know that.
I'm super popular. No, but I've ran into like people that like want to burn down my house because I don't agree with them, or
Oh my
not
god.
literally, but people that just they want to cancel me because I'm out here trying to do research and really discover something, and it's that part is baffling to me because I thought that's what we were all here for. And there are people that are, there's a lot of people that are, but there's a lot of people that again, they just aren't. They want the scary story. That's what they're here for. And
Yes. And if
well,
that's what you want, well then go listen to those type of things and leave
yeah.
everybody alone and be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there's plenty more to go out there and consume.
Yes.
But that's what I say. You know what? There's enough at the paranormal table for all of us.
Oh, yes.
Speaking of Tobias, we're both going to be at the Frogman Festival here in
Ah,
Mason, Ohio.
I'm glad you brought that up because I certainly wanted to bring it up and ask you. You're in fact going to be master of ceremonies, are you not?
I am. I am the poster child for the Frogman Festival. Yeah, it'll be great. Well, that's actually being ran by cartographer Jeff Craig that I mentioned earlier with the Map in Black.
Oh
It
wow,
it's
excellent.
going to be a fantastic event. But Tobias asked me if it would be too much if he, or basically like asked my blessing if it was okay for him to talk about the Mothman. And I absolutely want him to talk about the because that's my thing too, and that's his thing, and I'm like, yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Now, I give a Mothman presentation. I typically do a history and like an up to date, like where are we now? What is this phenomena? This go around, I was specifically asked to talk about my experience with all of this and make it very personal, and I told him that, yeah, mine's going to be more personal. Talk about whatever you want. There's plenty of room at Mothman's table for the both of
Oh
us. I
yes.
want people to research the same things that I'm researching. I want more eyes on it because it's just me.
I'm only laughing because when you said Mothman's table, all I could imagine was like the Last Supper. There's Mothman, and then there's sitting next to him is John Keel, like John
Yes.
the Beloved. And then there's all these other researchers, like as the 12 apostles. Yes. And that just struck me funny. That's all.
If nobody's created this as art yet, it
That
needs to
should be out
happen.
there.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. But yeah, that's my view on it. But yeah, the Progman Festival, it's going to be a great, fantastic time. It's definitely going to be the event of the year. So
Oh,
I'm
yes.
excited
And
for that.
when is that? When and where is that happening?
Yeah, that's March 4th at the Great Wolf Lodge in Mason, Ohio. So it's very soon. It's coming up.
And I tell you this, and I tell you this in complete seriousness. I cannot make it this year. I'm gonna make it next year. Okay. I won't be there. Um, as I said, I'm doing some upgrades here,
Sure.
and things are going to change, and I'm going to be there next year, and it's gonna kick ass. Okay.
I'll be there next year, I'm sure.
Oh,
Um,
great.
I'm like, I will headline this thing every year if that's what it takes. I mean,
I
it's
don't
me.
think they could have chosen anybody better, you know.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's gonna be great. There's gonna be tons of amazing people. MetaZoo's gonna be there holding a $50,000 tournament if you're into that. There is going to be, I mean, just all kinds of people talking about all kinds of things. It's just you don't want to miss it. So,
When
well,
do you
you're gonna
win
miss
this?
it, and I'm sorry, but
That's the biggest, I'm going to get some things straightened out so that I can do more traveling.
I get it. It's
Because
expensive.
yes, and it's just, well, it's, you have your situation, I have my situation.
Sure.
Everybody has their own situation, and it's hard for me to travel for multiple reasons. Um, I have problems with driving. There's a whole
I
different
understand
story
that.
to that.
Yeah.
But so I basically need to fly there or take the train, and the train only goes so many places, and
Yeah.
I'll never take Greyhound again because oh God.
I I took Greyhound one time for a 20-hour trip. I get it.
Here's the thing. And just to digress briefly, years ago, okay, like 20 years ago minimum, I took Greyhound all over the country, and it was great. And I'm probably going 30 years back, really. It was very nice. It was clean. It went everywhere. I mean, it went to small towns. Like maybe it only shows up once a day, but
Yeah.
it goes to like every neck of the woods. Well, that's changed a lot. I took Greyhound in 2021 to go to the Strange Realities Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was worth doing it, but I won't do it again because
Yeah.
it was terrible. And the Milwaukee Greyhound station was great because it's the same as the Amtrak station. It's clean, it's nice, it has all the amenities. And I go to Chicago, it's like going to jail. Um, it's terrible. And I'm like, this is the third largest city in the country. How the hell is the Greyhound station such a dump? They don't have 24-hour food.
Yeah.
You're Chicago. Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. You don't have anything that's open all night. I get there at like 10:30 and I have diabetes. I need to eat at certain
Yep.
times and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's like nothing's open. How can nothing be open? You're Chicago, for God's sake. So I get by and I get to Indianapolis and I learned that the maps are wrong. And actually, Indiana is roughly the size of Brazil. Because we drive and drive and drive and drive. And eventually we arrive at the Indiana bus station, which is so filthy. Oh my God. I have to take insulin. And I go in this bathroom and I'm like, there's no clean place I can even shoot my insulin. What the hell? And they had a snack bar that would serve you like microwaved sandwiches out of the machine.
Oh.
It was wretched. And across the street, literally across the street, you can see White Castle. So I walk out and I go to White Castle. No, you have to have a car to go through the drive-through. But I
Oh.
can see White Castle, but I can't have it.
Oh.
Like I just want White Castle. I have money. I can press a $20 bill up against the glass. And yeah, it was a drag, total
Yeah,
drag.
I
Yeah.
understand. Like I said, I took a 20-hour trip. Well, the first one was 16 hours. Well, supposed to be. But I had a layover and the bus that was supposed to pick us up was broken down. So I was
Hmm.
stranded and actually in Nashville, Tennessee,
Oh
um,
wow.
for like 6 hours. And I'm
But
like,
their Greyhound station seemed really nice.
it was okay. Yeah, it was all
Yeah.
right. Well, but
Hmm.
I was there at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So
Oh,
every so
that's
like their
probably not the
food,
best.
yeah, everything was closed. That wasn't great, but it is a nicer station compared to some. You're right, some of the other ones. Sometimes your station is just at like a truck stop and stuff. So
Oh yes.
it
When
just
we went through
depends.
where's that? It's Gary, Indiana. Um
Oh,
the oh, we didn't stop.
oh,
The
good.
driver just announced if anybody needs to pull the lever, if anybody needs to stop in Gary, because we're just going through. And we just the bus never stopped moving.
Everybody's like, no.
Apparently nobody was there, so then we just rolled on through. Yes, yes.
Just kept on going. Yeah, I got stuck there. The trip back wasn't as bad, but the trip back, some guy was trying to get me to run away with him, and I was like, no,
Oh
I'm going
God.
home.
I don't mean to make light of that, but God, there always are so many just flat out nuts
Ugh.
on
And lots
on
of Amish on the Greyhound. They
oh,
love
they
the
love it.
Greyhound.
Yeah, they run that shit, man.
Yeah,
And they know how to do it. They had the neck pillows
yeah.
and they had like all their preparations. They were, and they all like at least some of them knew each other. Like, hey, haven't seen you in so long, and they're having a great time. Like, oh
Yeah,
God,
a lot
just
of
leave me
Amish on the
alone, man.
Greyhound.
I'm trying to sleep here. Just leave me alone. You know, try to take up maximum space so nobody sits next to me.
Yeah. Yep, I know the story. Never again. I agree. Yeah, that'll never happen.
Yes, yes. But next year, I'm definitely going to be at the Frogman Festival. That's going to happen.
That'll be awesome. It'll be great,
Indeed.
great to have
Hell
you.
yeah.
I
I
think it'll
look forward to
happen.
it.
I think there'll be a number two. This is the first of its kind. But so far it
Oh,
is
I'm sorry. I thought this was a thing that went on and on for years.
no, 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 no. This is a brand new festival.
Oh,
And I was kind of asking because Jeff Craig's been a saint and he's let me he asked my recommendation on the speakers. He's kind of I've had a little bit more of the inside than I think most people do with festivals that aren't theirs. But I asked him, I was like, well, how many tickets are you allowed to sell? And he goes, oh, you know what? I don't know. We've just been letting people buy them. Like, oh, okay. So people will just see.
okay. Nothing could possibly go wrong there.
No, not at all. It's indoors. Well, Mothman Festival last year was crazy. It's the craziest I have ever seen a festival ever. And I've been to some like music festivals. No, it was nuts. And I mean, you had
If
people parking in Ohio and walking to West Virginia to get to the Mothman Festival.
wow.
But it was something else. But it's outside, so
And
anybody can just show up.
if I
Uh,
may, everybody can been in confinement for like a couple of years,
yeah, yeah,
and suddenly you can go to a festival.
yeah.
Hell yeah!
And it's the Mothman Festival. I agree. It might not be as large next year. But it was, I mean, gosh, at some points during the day, you couldn't even walk through it. You just had to find a spot and hang out. But
Wow.
yeah, it was something else. It was large. But I'm like, what if this turns into that and we don't have the space for people? But that part's not my problem. I'm just there to talk. So we'll see what happens with it. But I'm excited. It'll be a good event.
We shall indeed. Um, I was gonna. Oh, hey. Do you mind if we take a 5 minute break?
Sure.
Okay, great. Let me just take care of a couple things, and we'll be right back in about 5 minutes.
Sure.
Which to you listeners at home will be poof.
Instantaneous. Sure. Do you want me to leave or do I just
Oh no, not at all. No,
okay,
it's fine.
gotcha.
Um, and we are back. Thank you for the moment there. So to shift gears a little bit, in addition to being all of the things that I've mentioned earlier, an investigator and researcher and documentary filmmaker, you're also a practicing witch, is that correct?
I am. Yeah. I that puts a bad taste in some people's mouth, but I promise it's not as naughty or scary as it sounds.
I hope that we've at least with the people who listen to this show, come on, you
Well,
know,
true. Fair
you
enough.
know, they either don't mind or are sophisticated enough to know that we're not in the satanic panic. We may be in the second one, but we're not, we're not in the 80s,
Yeah.
and you're not killing cats. Okay.
No, no, no,
Um,
not at all.
in fact, every person who describes himself as a witch I know has at least a cat.
At least one cat. Yeah, I do.
Yes.
I have at least one.
And it usually is in the multiples, for some, and that's in real life too. I mean, that's not just, well, this is real life too, but like
Sure.
people I know face to face, like as neighbors or whatever. I know a couple of witches, and it was Cat City. um, so I guess they're all hanging around waiting to be familiars or something, but
Mine are my children, so I can't say that. And they're not. I don't know. Do they keep spirits away or anything? I'm not sure. Probably not. They're too lazy and old for that now. But I like dogs too. I'm not allowed. My cats won't let me have dogs, so
I
I
have a
got them
small
first.
dog who sometimes feels he should be part of the podcast,
Yes,
and I had
yeah.
to chase him back out of here because he's not guest starring tonight. Um,
I understand the struggle.
oh yes, oh yes. So, like, okay, tell me from just the dumb obvious questions. Um, so like, are you Wiccan or pagan or ceremonial magic, or I mean, this stuff is broad.
It is. Yeah, witchcraft is a very witchcraft spell work. They're all very umbrella terms for a lot of things. I consider myself eclectic. So none of it to me is necessarily none of it's like tied to spirituality. Actually, it's all pretty scientific.
Hmm.
Um so I, like I said, started all of this as a skeptic, as a big skeptic, and I had practiced witchcraft. I had actually gotten into Wicca. I don't even know
No,
the proper term.
Wicca, yeah.
Wicca, yeah. When I was a teenager, um, I was in this strange relationship with a girl, and her mom and her mom's best friend were like they were practicing witches, and so I learned a lot from them, which was really interesting, because her mom was kind of more of an Appalachian folk witch.
Oh wow,
She
like a
Yeah,
what you might call a cunning woman.
yeah, I mean she was Christian still, but
Well,
she,
that's kind of folk magic.
it is, yeah, it's
You
very
go to
folk
church on
magic.
Sunday, and
It
then
is.
you throw chicken bones together on Friday night or something under a
Exactly.
full moon, and yes, things happen.
So I'd kind of started there, but then as I got older and kind of got away from those people in general, not that I'm not like I escaped or anything, they're not bad
No,
people.
no, no.
But just as I got older, then I started, really, kind of clinging on to science a lot more. Um, I've always been interested in weird stuff, but even like the stuff I was interested in the weird was like cryptozoology, and it was like flesh and blood based cryptozoology. I mean, it was just undiscovered animals. And I had hit this weird pivotal time, this really important time in my life. And I had a very transforming moment. And I don't mean like just transforming in a spiritual way, just I'd been through a lot of trauma in my lifetime. I'd finally hit a point where I worked through it all. And I became not the same person that I was at all. The way that I describe it to people is it's like my brain completely melted and then reformed. That was nuts for, for a minute, during, that kind of situation. But, growth does that to you. So,
Well,
what,
there's,
one thing,
if I may,
oh, go
there's
ahead.
no tight line between the spiritual and the psychological. I mean, they're almost the you're almost describing the same thing in different
Yes.
terms, maybe.
Right, exactly. And so, one thing that I learned, because I had told myself through brimstone and fire. I mean, I had beaten the odds. Because I knew at that time I'd go to counseling. I mean, my gosh, I'd have a new counselor every couple of months because they had no idea what to do with me by the time I got done telling them everything I'd been through. They're like, statistically, you should be alive. So we don't know. You're doing good. I'm like, oh, well, thanks, I guess. When that sounds just like a lot of trauma bravado, but I mean, it's not. I
No,
genuinely
no.
have a crazy history. And
And I haven't wanted to prod, but yes, I'm aware that you've been through the hell
well,
and
and
back, you know.
yeah, I've shared some things. I'm very comfortable talking about the things I've been through. I understand that this here is not the time and the place, but maybe someday somewhere I'll put it out there in a story and people can,
Sure.
pick it up. But so I wanted to use that. It had become a superpower at that point. I had done it. My God, I had done it.
Can
And
I
oh,
just
go ahead.
interject? Do
Sure.
you have severe PTSD?
Oh, I have CPTSD.
Oh,
It's complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
okay.
It's something that happens when you experience trauma over and over and especially at a young age and just kind of living through. So it is extreme PTSD basically. But yes, I do. Thank you for asking.
Well, I was asking honestly because I do too.
A lot of
I
people in this community
have,
do.
I receive treatment from the VA for
Mhm.
PTSD related to the war in Somalia. And, you know, that's something I've been pretty open about. But yeah, I'm picking up where you're coming from.
When
And
you have to learn how to live with something like that, life becomes very interesting. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit more because I've actually it's kind of part of the research that I do. So when I started transforming and I became this new person, people wanted to know how, and I needed to be able to tell people how. It didn't do me any good if I had this secret and I was keeping it to myself. And what I started doing at the time where I felt my absolute lowest, where I woke up every single morning and I did not think that I would live to that evening because I didn't want to, was I faked it. I faked it. I woke up every single day and lied to myself. My life was great. Everything was perfect. I was beautiful and I was having a great time and I had lots of friends. And I mean, everything that I said was a lie until it wasn't, until finally it was not.
I,
And
I'm
my,
thinking like all those things are true, like right now.
well, they are now, but
Okay.
they are now. At the time, they were not. And um, which of course we're all always a work in progress, and yada yada yada. But like I said, I had done this every single day. I woke up and I faked it. I mean, I did words of affirmation every single day. Every moment that I had, I was doing that, and eventually, it did become true. So I had learned at that point in time that the law of attraction was very real, and that's kind of what opened me up a little bit to the possibility of something being there in regards to this whole manifestation thing. So when I say that I am a witchcraft and that or that I practice witchcraft, that I'm a witch, basically it's that I'm just utilizing the law of attraction to make my universe work for me. And I mean, it's real. It doesn't work the way that you think it works. I can't tell you exactly how it works, but I can tell you that it does. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way because the timing is off on it, because you want it right now. But that's kind of the key to it, is that, especially when you're someone like me, and one of your lessons that you have to continuously remind yourself of is patience. You're definitely not going to get it right away. But that's how I started
I'm
kind of
only
getting.
laughing because I am exactly the
Yeah.
same way.
Yes.
And like I order something, I'd like it if the package just landed once I
Yeah.
clicked. I don't want it a week from now. I want it now.
It's
If I want it a week
ridiculous.
from now, I'd
Yeah.
order it in a week. I want it
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Now, damn
Yes.
it, now.
Yes. But then also, like, I
Yes,
don't want to
I
go to the store and get it. I buy a lot of things online that I could just go to the store and pick up. And then I'm like mad at myself, like, why don't I just go and do that? But I digress. But yes, so I practice a lot of mostly candle magic and things like that. But right before I got into Mothman research, I started kind of, things kind of got bad again. It wasn't terrible, just I didn't feel great. And, that's just part of having a chemical imbalance. And you kind of accept that about yourself eventually. You're not always going to feel good. And, one of my friends said, get you a tarot card deck. And I was like, oh, okay. So I did. You know what? I took her advice. What did I have to lose? I got myself a tarot card deck and I was reading cards every day. And they were always eerily accurate. I was like, okay, because I was one of those people. I'm like, okay, divination. It's just there's such general statements, that applies to anybody. But it doesn't. When you look at every single card has a very specific meaning. And then, for me, I was just doing one card pull. So every day I'd wake up and pull a card, which is, something that I like to do now, even just kind of get the vibe of the day. But when you do like larger spreads and you kind of start putting them all together, then it tells a story. And that story just so happens to every single time hit hit it out of the park,
Oh,
there's something to that.
if I may interject, you
Sure.
did one for me
I did.
quite recently, and I can't tell you how perfectly on that was. It
It's,
was really accurate,
yeah,
and I haven't told you all that much
no,
about my day-to-day life, where you could like make it, fit in. No, I totally believe you through those, and that's what you got. And that exactly was what, it was very descriptive of what was going
yeah,
on in my life, and very inspirational. I mean, it was great. I
yeah.
really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, all the I did it for my patrons, um, which I'd like to start kind of making a regular thing because I think I didn't get any bad remarks. Everybody's like, "Wow, that's scary." Actually, it was hilarious because when I was advertising for it, okay, I will share this part. Usually, I keep my readings, kind of confidential, but I'll share this much. Jeff Craig is a patron, and he was like, "Oh, I got my email." But I haven't read it yet because I'm so exhausted. And I cracked up because one of his things was that he's perpetually exhausted because he's working too much because he thinks he's not doing enough. And,
Yes, yes, it was like
and
that. I mean, it
right.
was
And,
eerily on,
that's, that is how it is. And so, I'd kind of gotten these cards. And again, I'm still on the fence. And like maybe a month after that, um, that's when I left and I went to the Mothman Festival and it changed my entire life because I was hit with a string of synchronicities. And at the time I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what that was called. I wasn't familiar with the term. But you know, I couldn't possibly believe in coincidence after that weekend that I had. And it was wild. I mean, it blew my mind. So honestly, when I do my research now, as scientifically based as it is, I do believe that there is a science to all of that, even as spiritual and as woo as all that sounds. I think there is a science to it. And when I research something, I don't pick these topics. I don't get to choose them. They're picked for me. They're kind of landed into my lap. And then I'm like kind of forced to go, okay, well, I guess it's time to look at this. And then that's what I do. That's how I got on in the Dogman research. I didn't pick that. It just kept landing in my lap. And Helltown, that's another one. And that one came full circle. I mean, my gosh, I wasn't going to go investigate that Mothman sighting and health. I had no reason to go up there. But then people kept asking me about it and people kept, bringing it to my attention or, they'd recommend that stupid mockumentary. And I'd look at my research partner and I'd be like, look, because it blows your mind every time it happens. You're like, look, there it is. Guess what? Helltown, it's time. And because I don't know what it is. Some people call it God. Some people refer to it as gods. I just call it the universe. Whatever that energy is, the same thing. And, again, I do think that there's something there to it. Will I prove that in my lifetime? Probably not, but I'm going to try. That's made me very curious about the phenomenon. So,
Oh, I've known some very scientifically minded people who also did some form of magical practice and just kind of referred to it as shifting the odds using your will
yeah.
and making things work out for you. And, didn't necessarily have a spiritual framework around it. It doesn't have to be a religion. It just can be some stuff you do.
Yeah. Right. And I've gotten into astrology a little bit. It's kind
I
of
was about that.
difficult.
That was going to be go ahead. That was going to be my next question.
As astrology. It's difficult for me because I don't know what time I was born. And here's the thing, you can't just read your horoscope. People are like, oh, my horoscope's never accurate. Well, that's because you're not supposed to just read your horoscope. It's a whole other big thing. It's a big thing.
And I have to
And
draw a distinction between the BS horoscopes that are in the newspaper, which, you may as well read fortune cookies.
yes,
Though
right.
I have to, if you don't mind, I'd like to tell briefly just a story about fortune
Sure.
cookies. So a few years ago, um, I picked up Chinese food for my family. Okay, that's not the story, but we had fortune
Great
cookies.
story.
People are like, yeah, that really happened.
I love that for you. Yeah.
Anyway, my son was practicing karate in his room, and he was trying to break this board, and he's karate chopping it and karate chopping it, and finally he breaks it. And at the same time, I'm reading a fortune cookie that says the tree is not felled with one stroke, and I'm like, okay, what are the
Wow.
odds that I would be reading that fortune at the same time he's chopping away at this piece of wood until it breaks? It's
That is, you know what? That is really odd because, and I'll tell you what, here we go. That weekend, that Mothman weekend, okay? Um, this guy who happened to be an integral player in all of this situation, he had actually come up to attend the Mothman festival with me and my friends. He was the one making the Mothman video. Okay, this is how this all started. One of the friends that was with us, all right, he is a karate teacher guy, and he taught him that weekend to break boards on. So, that's what I mean. Maybe that one's a little more of a stretch, but maybe it's not. It's not always like that. Sometimes it's just very obvious, but that's what I'm talking about. That happens constantly in my life. It's things are always very significant, and
I've had a few, and when it hits you, it really hits you. Yes.
you feel it. Oh yeah, you feel it in your whole body, and it's significant compared to just like, there's some small things, and you're just like, there's some people that are like synchronicity all the time, and it's not necessarily that. But when it hits you, but yeah, astrology is a big one. I will follow it from time to time, but truth be told, it's a whole other study that I have not conquered quite yet. And like I said, it's hard because I don't know what time I was born, and that seems to be really significant. People, you almost have to know, and I don't. So one thing that I decided to get into a little bit more instead was numerology, and
Ah,
mostly that's because I see repeating numbers a lot, or have seen repeating numbers a lot, and I just decide, what does that mean? I'll look up a lot of numbers, symbolism and animal symbolism and things like that, just to see if any of it matters. And sometimes it does, and so I got into numerology. Now, what had really interested me in it was that I was following a Twitter account, and through the pandemic was kind of learning all this stuff, like we all were. And that Twitter account happens to be a numerology account. That's strictly what they're based in. And
wow.
they had made predictions with numbers way back when. Okay, they had made these predictions. Now with Twitter at that time, you can now if you pay for it, but you couldn't then edit your tweets. So if you put that tweet out there, and it's there forever. So this account would go back and share things that they had typed up years ago about this that were like dead on. And what I mean by dead on is like they were predicting the celebrities that were getting COVID and the ones that would live and the ones that wouldn't. It was nuts.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, there's going to be a big change in humanity in 2020. Now, let me tell you, 2020 was a 4 year, and a 4 year is kind of the start of a new foundation. It's kind of breaking apart your old foundation to build you back up. So, I mean, that was significant, but again, that's so general. That could apply to anybody and anything. No, this was like accurate. So I had started like really looking into numbers and how that affects things, and it is very strange, the rabbit hole that you find when you start looking down there, because it's so much simpler than it is to try to do it with astrology. Everybody's got a life path number, and then that life path kind of sets you on. Now when you look at things like, well, guess what, physics, it's all math based. So it's not a far stretch to think that maybe there is a numbers game at play here a little bit. And, maybe that it's not so much divine intervention, but just quantum mechanics, so
Yes, I'm absolutely fascinated with numerology.
yeah,
I It's one of those things on my to-do list is to do a deep dive into that because I mean it keeps coming up and it does seem to be more realistic
yeah.
than some other things that are around. And numbers do come up
Hmm.
and they do seem to affect things and they do seem to have a deeper message. And I can't deny that because I see it in day-to-day life. And yeah, I fully understand that. And yes, to do astrology, to really do real astrology, there's a very limited number of people who do what I would call real astrology. Um, there's 10 million bullshit artists, but there's like a small core group that really do something that goes back to like Mesopotamia or where have you. But numerology, yeah, that absolutely fascinates me, and I'm
Yeah. It is really, and it's like I said, it's a lot easier for anybody that wants to get into anything like that. Get into numerology. You could easily pick up a book on it. I mean, you could do a Google search, really. It's so simple, and learn the basics of it. And I mean, you kind of build, as you go, you kind of learn as you go. Now, people that are like, oh, it's 11:11. Okay, listen. If you're sitting looking at your phone all day long, you're going to see 11:11 twice a day. All right. That's going to happen. So there are specifics that do
cannot be
attribute.
denied. Yes,
Right,
you a
exactly.
stopped clock is right twice a day. Yes.
Exactly. It's just going to be, that's just the way it is. But when you do start getting into it, you will notice like seeing patterned numbers more. Now, how this all kind of ties back to like tarot, I was kind of talking about that. And I don't think that there is an actual spirit behind tarot. I'm not going to say that there's no influence. But I look at tarot reading the same way that I look at that I use a spirit box. Okay. So I'll explain. When I pull a tarot card, it's not that there's anything that's influencing or that can tell the future. It's just that for whatever reason, that is the exact thing that you need to hear at that exact time. And that's just the universe's way of making sure that you hear it. Spirit boxes are the same way. I don't think that it's a ghost you're talking to. I don't think it's a person. I think that you hear what needs to be heard at that time that you hear it.
That is a
Um,
very interesting take
it
because
is.
most people who use spirit boxes think they're talking to the guy who died here 100 years ago, and that's not necessarily what's happening.
No, it's just radio stations. It's just flipping through the radio stations really, really fast. And you're going to pick out pieces and phrases and words. But I think that, again, it's not necessarily that it's somebody directly speaking, but it's more so those are the phrases and words that has been influenced on you. Now, again, I don't want to call it a spirit. I just don't feel right calling it that. But it is some type of divine intervention that play there. And, what does it mean? I don't know. I don't know. But that's my view on using those types of tools, is just kind of knowing. But I've had, as skeptical as I have had some really influential, really emotional experiences with some of this stuff. And
Oh, I believe that.
it
Um,
has been intense sometimes, and to where I'm like, well, it's got to be something else then besides just happenstance.
the reading you gave me was only the second I've ever had in my life, and because I'll be honest, I grew up in the '80s and I had a deep fear of anything like that.
Well, satanic
Okay.
panic, yeah, it was real.
Yes, and I grew up with Pat Robertson, and that didn't help. Okay, um, but once I kind of like tarot was something that was non like no, I'm not hearing voices or anything. I
Right.
could accept that. Okay, I could do this, and so I got the first reading of my life at um Strange Realities in Nashville 2021. And it was bang, perfectly on. And I'm like, how could, and this person was a complete stranger.
Yeah.
How could you do that? Well, she didn't really do anything. She did something, but she didn't know anything about me. She
Yeah.
just did the tarot and it came out right on. And it was the same thing that you did. And it was, I mean, yours is more detailed, but it was like, pow. It's like really strangely accurate. But no, I didn't feel like I was talking to a spirit. I just felt like you were somehow perceiving the situation.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily predicting the future. It was just kind of telling me what's going on in the present. And, but in a very insightful way, in a way that was, you know, certainly equal to therapy. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I agree with that's what I tell people. You know, people that claim that they can predict the future outcomes or anything with tarot, they're bullshit artists. That's a bullshit artist. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But tarot will
California psychics, dollar a minute, solve all
exactly.
your problems.
Exactly. But it will
No, no, no.
clarify things for you. And I mean, it tells you what you already know. It just may say it in a different way so that it just like you would with talk therapy, where you would tell your counselor, they're not necessarily there to tell you what to do. They're just there to give you a different perspective on the situation so that way you can make a better decision. And, you know, tarot is it's very similar to that. You know, so it is very, upsetting when people pretend to do other things with it, especially when you know what it means. But there is some form of spookiness in there because, you know, again, when you're pulling these cards, and I don't remember if yours was one of them, I had a specific spread I was using for everybody. But some people got more cards than others because just the way that I shuffle them. I mean, I'll shuffle them and I don't pick the card. The card literally jumps out of the deck and lands. And so sometimes you'll get two at a time. And so all those cards together tell a very specific story. And that's kind of where the spooky element, you know, comes into play there. And then on top of that, I probably got over 15 tarot card decks. I really do. And I use different ones because different ones kind of tell me things in a different way. I have one that is very nice. Okay. It tells you things in a very nice way. I have one that's an asshole and it straight up is not afraid to hurt your feelings. And will tell you exactly. That's the one that I use for everybody for the patrons too. I'm like, I
Oh,
want
wow. I got off
accuracy.
pretty lightly then.
Yeah, I was like, I want accuracy. What are these people expecting? And yeah, it will hurt your feelings if it needs to. And then I've got one that I just use for work. It's a cryptid deck. It's got cryptids on it, and
Oh,
I
wow.
only
That's
use
cool as
that.
hell.
No, 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 no. Wait a minute. No, I did use the cryptid deck for. Never mind. I used that for the patrons. I didn't use the asshole one for you guys. I guess I was nice. Um,
Well, thanks, because I'd rather have Bigfoot tell me than have Andrew Dice Clay fucking yelling in my face.
Yeah, because they will. Man, those cards will mess you up, and you're like, "Damn it, I already knew this, but you didn't have to tell me anyway." You know, but yeah, so I'll use different decks for different things because they kind of just seem to have different energies to them. I don't know how to explain it besides that. Um,
Oh
but
no,
that
I have a good friend who participated in making a ufology tarot deck. I don't know if
ooh,
you've heard of it, but it's out there now.
probably there's a couple of them. Like I said, I got so many, and I buy them all the time. Do I need another deck? No. Will I buy another deck? Oh yeah, I'll probably buy three more this year at least. Um, you know, it'll happen. But yeah, I mean, so as far as like me being a witch, is that witchy? I guess so. I mean, some people I'm using tools of divination, so some people see it that way. I carry crystals around. Do they do anything? If I think that they do something, then yeah, I think they do. Do they have to be assigned specific meaning for that to happen? No, not necessarily. I think that intent is really the name of the game, and it's not much different from other things that you do. And you know, I tell people that. Of course, I've um not hooked up with people, but you know, I've gotten together.
I
All of this
understand what
sounds
you mean
sexual, but I
in the
have talked to
normal
people.
sense.
I've talked to people, you know, who are very much against what I do. I had one. I was in this thing. It's called Twitter Spaces. Maybe some people are familiar, maybe they're not. But it's basically like a voice channel where like you have a show and anybody can kind of come up and talk. And I'll do this sometimes on Twitter for podcasters, for people to pitch their podcast and try to network with each other. And there was one girl that came up. She had actually escaped a cult, and the host of the show at the time was like, "Well, you should talk to Ashers because I think she would, that'd be really interesting because she does, true crime stuff sometimes. And she was like, well, but she's a witch, so I don't associate with witches. And I was like, excuse me,
Are
when
you
you're showing a
sure you
picture,
escaped?
right, exactly. I think you just joined a different one. No, but it's not different, and it's not different than prayer. It's the same thing. Manifestation is the same thing. That's what you're doing when you're praying. It's
And
it's the
I
same
say
thing.
that I'm sorry. I I interrupt a lot. I'm
No, you're
sorry.
fine.
Um, but I was briefly a part of two fundamentalist Christian cults
Yeah,
in my early 20s. I'm in my early 50s now, so that's cool. We can
removed.
talk about it. Yeah. But yeah, escaping is harder than you think.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I get where people are coming from, that you get terrorized by everything's of the devil. It's funny to me how fundamentalist Christianity, sometimes called evangelical Christianity, is like the PR department for the devil, because they hype him up all the time. And yeah, they make you afraid of a lot of things that maybe you shouldn't be afraid of.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And that's exactly what it is. And I mean, so like I said, I've had people that try to come for me, and it's like, I don't hate Christians. I don't hate anybody for their views. Religion and spirituality is a personal experience, and it's none of my business what your beliefs are. Um, I actually may even take up interest in it and ask you why you think that way or what got you there. And so I just ask for the same basic respect because we're both doing the same thing, and we're we're just calling it something different. And but it's still
By the
interesting
way,
how many feathers I ruffle for that.
that's the great secret of Masonry,
Oh no.
Freemasonry.
So I'm a
Yes.
Freemason. Oh my gosh.
The great secret is, and I'll tell you now, and
Everybody's gonna know.
I'm 100% sure that I'm going to be fine for saying this, because it was a big deal 500 years ago when you could get killed for this stuff. But the great secret of Masonry isn't the handshake or, special words. The great secret is there's only one God, and we call that God by different names. And all religions really point in the same direction. Bango, that's the great secret. Now that today, you can say that on Oprah and it'd be fine, but in 1500, it'd probably get you killed.
Oh my.
So that's why it's the big secret. But that's kind of what the big secret is.
Wow.
Yes.
I never knew I was a Freemason. You learn something new every day.
Well,
Um,
you haven't been initiated, but
well, maybe I should. I don't know. Yes, exactly. Again, it's not anybody's business. I got really heavy into near death experience research,
Oh,
and
there's some material there. Hell yeah.
very interesting. I know this is why I have to keep coming back on because I always have something new. It's a
Indeed.
something large, but I'll touch on it for a second. Near death experiences are interesting. I really got interested in it when my grandmother was dying, because it's not just like, I guess I'll just say death in general. I've kind of been interested. That sounds weird, but you know what I mean. Kind of
No,
been.
nobody thinks you're killing anybody. It's cool.
No, I'm definitely not. I'm definitely not a serial killer. But
Are those some words you thought you'd ever have to say?
I mean, that's
It-
but
she's fine. It's fine. Go ahead, but please go ahead.
when my grandmother was dying, she had very interesting experiences. One time she called my aunt, and she was, asking my aunt, well, why don't you just come inside? And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, you've been standing around outside for a while. Why don't you just come in? My aunt was not standing outside. Nobody was. That was interesting. She also, this is what really got
Oh,
me.
that is interesting.
It is interesting. She also was like laughing, sitting with one. I have a lot of aunts. We're an Italian family, and she was, she was
Which,
like,
if I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Sure.
I was shocked. One of it takes a little bit to shock me, but when you said you were Italian, I was like, "What? You look
Yes.
like you were Ireland come to life. What the hell?"
Well, my red hair is fake and I don't go out in the sun a lot. So,
Touche. Please go on with your story. I was just
but
needlessly
I
butting
am
in.
very, yeah, I'm very Italian. My maiden name is Mayola. So, um, I'm very Italian. Um, but my grandmother's sitting there with my a couple of my aunts, and she starts laughing, and she was like, that little guy's so funny right there, and they're like, what are you talking about? And
Oh
she's
dear.
yeah, she's seeing a creature sitting on the couch with my aunt. She's like, oh, he looks just like E.T. from the movie.
Well,
So my
that's comforting.
grandma saw aliens, right, when while she was not while she was dying, but I mean it was like leading up to her death. And a lot of people, when you look at like, unfortunately, if you've ever had to go through it, but when people don't suddenly die, right, when we get old and we kind of start dying, people get kind of weird when they're dying, and start seeing things. And so I'm like, well, is there anything to that? Well, I also wanted to look into near death experiences. I had a friend who had overdosed and was brought back to life. They had overdosed 4 times actually in their lifetime, and I asked them what happened every time, and they said nothing, nothing happened, and that I don't know if I find that more comforting or terrifying, um, but it got me interested to dig down this rabbit hole. Well, people do die all the time, and they're revived. What happens? And when you look at the different stories and the different experiences, they're all vastly different. Nobody's got the same one. So you still can't even like base your religious views off of that, because you'll have people that
Oh
are
no.
grow up in Christian homes who end up, oh, I saw the light, I saw God, or they grow up in Christian homes and they went to hell. But they've been beaten into submission and thinking that hell's a bad place and they're a bad person. There is an influence there for the
If I
most
just
part.
may
Oh, go
butt
ahead.
in
Yeah.
again, um, one about hell being a bad place. One of the most inspiring interviews I've done so far was with this strangeite Mormon elder, not the Salt Lake City Mormons, but a offshoot, and not the weird kind where they, the bad kind. No, these people are really good people. They live in Burlington, Wisconsin. I know them, and they're good people. And he said, even the people that go to hell, they don't. They're where they want to be. Like they were people who in life wanted to live this kind of life, and now they get to live it forever. And so they're actually happy being in hell. They wouldn't be
Yeah.
happy being in heaven. And I thought that was pretty profound, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, it was
Yeah.
kind of like party like a rock star type of that's your afterlife. If that's what you wanted, well, there you got it. Okay. And I thought that was pretty cool. That impressed me as being kind of deep. But
It is interesting, right? The type of influence that, just what you're brought up with kind of has on you. And you've got people that weren't believers at all that, eventually convert to something because they died and they experienced this, or you've got people that were Christians and then they find out that that's all a lie. And, because they died and they experienced something else. It is interesting to see, but overall, the overwhelming majority of people that have had near death experiences, they're not afraid to die anymore. And
that's an
that's
interesting thing, isn't it?
really telling. Most of them are at peace with it. Not that they want to speed it up or anything, just that they know that they'll be okay. It was very calming. Euphoric is one of the, words used, whatever the experience is, most of the time. It feels good to die. And that's now don't take that and run with it. Like I said, they're not rushing for it or anything.
Don't try this
Um,
at home.
no, don't try this at all. Please do not. I do not need that blood on my hands. I've got enough. No. But
In full disclosure, I've lately been attending a spiritualist church. Um, First of all, because I found there were actual practicing spiritualists, not like just 100 years ago.
Yeah,
Oh no, they live like 10 miles away. They go to church on Sundays, and so I had to get involved with that.
sure.
And yeah, the biggest factor has been we continue after death. That's their whole
Right.
thing. That you cross through the veil, but you're still yourself and you're still doing stuff. And it's not the end. And that's been very impressive to me. And I've had a few synchronicities that were off the chain, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that. It's not my biggest stance on it. Listen, I'm not meant to know what happens after you die. None of us are, right? I haven't died. I don't know. I'm not gonna tell you, there's no heaven or there's no hell or, we go on. I don't know. It's not my job. My job is here and now, and so that's why I put my main focus on. But like I said, I have been interested in people's experiences. And then on top of that, comparing those experiences to people that do DMT and have those experiences. There's definitely some type of tie there. Now, is this all just brain chemistry? Well, I don't know. How much do you know about DMT? Here's what I'll tell you about DMT. I've sat in the room while people have done it, and have they have both described to me separately exactly the same world that they were in when they were gone from here, exactly the same creatures. They have described to me seeing the other person wherever it was they were talking to the creatures that they were talking to. Okay. And I mean, what does that mean? Where does that, I mean, that gets a little off the rails, but you can't then
Oh
just say, well,
no,
it's brain chemicals.
I I've never touched this stuff because I got enough problems already.
That's okay. Yeah.
But
Me neither. I've
I
never done it.
I've had good friends who have done it, who have talked about experiencing those things, and it does seem to open a very specific world
Yeah.
where you see, well, the machine elves and,
Mhm.
the things that Terrence McKenna was talking about. They, there's a set experience that goes with that drug,
Yeah.
and there's a set experience that goes with ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And I, I'll be honest, we don't currently know enough, in my opinion, to understand what the hell's happening. But it
Yeah.
seems like we're going somewhere. Um, but
Yes.
yeah,
One of my goals, as a researcher one day would be to gather enough funds together to do an actual scientific research on this. And I would like to hook people up to brain scans while they're doing DMT and see what happens. And then outside of that, when we see what happens with the brain, how can we stimulate the brain without the drug to do this while we're sober, to replicate those results? Is that the
that'd be
key?
awesome.
Yeah, is that the key that we need to experience this other world that exists alongside of us? Somehow I think it's important, and I think that in just the general paranormal field, I think it's an important step that we have to take, but we have to start with being taken seriously enough for people to even fund something like that. And
Well, if
aside
I,
from it's, we don't, we just want to do drugs. I mean, it's not that,
no, it's quite honestly opposite of that. It's not a getting high experience. It's, well, okay. Let me just be blunt. We both have PTSD.
Yeah.
They've been treating PTSD in a controlled environment
Hmm.
with psychedelics.
Yes, they have. Yeah.
And some people have had
Successfully.
fantastic results.
Hmm.
I don't know how to feel about it because part of me says, yeah, I should totally do that. Now, I would only do that if I can sit next to my psychologist and like hold hands or something, because I don't need to see everything that's in my head.
Sure.
Um, but another part of me is like, geez, I this PTSD that I have, I'm I got a shitload of anxiety
Hmm.
and stuff in day-to-day life. But if some emergency actually happens, I know I'll be able to handle it.
True. Yes.
I will go into what I call dead calm, and I'll just handle whatever happens.
You get the
And
business. Yeah.
yes, and once upon a time, this guy pointed a gun at me, and he was in a stolen car, and it's a long story, but I was involved in a violent incident, and I called 911 and was talking with him, and my wife told me, "You sounded so calm. It's like you're in this shootout and you're like ordering a pizza." I mean, people aren't going to take seriously that you are really in danger because your voice is so calm. Well, at that moment, I was calm. Oh,
Yeah.
later I'll freak out about it and be a basket case, but at that moment, I could handle it. You know, and I
Later,
don't.
when you're by yourself and you start grappling with why
Oh,
was
you
I so
fucking
normal
freak
during
out.
that?
Yeah,
What's wrong with
it's
me? Yeah.
terrible, and I wake up in the morning and I'm freaking out over, well, I take prescription medicine for nightmares, but anyway,
Sure.
um, I'll deal with anxiety over trivial things. But if something really terrible happens, if the building catches on fire or whatever, I know that I'll go into that dead calm mode and take care of business.
Yeah.
And I'd hate to give that up. You know what I mean?
That's true. That does become quite the superpower. Hey, and that is very accurate. You experience things and people are my best friend all the time. I'll tell her something that happened in my childhood and I just talk about it like, you talk about anything. And she just shakes her head and she's like, "How do I not know anything about you?" And
Yes, yes,
she
yes.
explains that that's not normal. And I understand as an adult, that has worked through these things that it's not normal. I get that part. But like I said, it is my
But it's
superpower because I can help people that don't have that same I'm not going to call it strength. That's not fair. They just don't have the same skill set to handle things when they are tragic and they're not used to handling tragedy. Um
everybody hasn't been through everything you have.
exactly. Exactly. And
And
I haven't been through everything everybody else has either. Don't get me wrong, but
fair enough.
that's but I do try to be that person. But sometimes it can make me in those situations. That's where the anxiety and stuff comes in with just your everyday life. Sometimes it can make me feel inappropriately about situations, whether that be on the extreme of freaking out about things that people don't even think about day to day, or not managing emotions well when it comes to other people experiencing a hard time and maybe coming off as colder than what they would expect you to do
Oh yes.
um when something
It's
seems enormous to them.
though one of the best things I was ever told is that PTSD isn't mental illness. It's mental illness is an abnormal reaction to normal circumstances.
Yeah.
PTSD is a normal reaction to abnormal circumstances.
Yes.
That you shouldn't have had to deal with the things that you had to deal with, but you were able to deal with them.
Right.
And so that's what you're dealing with now.
Right.
And that seemed dead on to me that was about right.
It's very 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 accurate. But speaking I kind of mentioned earlier I wanted to talk about trauma and the paranormal, which is the title of the piece that I have that'll be in the Feminine Macabre coming out in June, I believe, and
Oh,
this summer.
excellent.
So I became published officially.
That's a great feeling, isn't it?
It's interesting.
It, I've never, if I take all the money I've ever made as a writer, and you can buy a really good pizza, but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's nice to have somebody else publish it and give you whatever they give you.
Yes, it is nice. Well, right. It feels validating, to have
Yes,
it
that's
be
the word I'm
somebody
looking for.
else. Because I will be writing a Mothman book and I'll be self-publishing it. But I had to submit this into somebody and they had to approve it and go, yes, this is good enough. Whereas when I self-publish, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's good or not. I'm putting it out there. It will be great. But
I have self-published a novel myself
yeah,
very recently, and Yes, I get you, but it's a
It'll be
different
great.
experience. Yeah.
But the topic that I had written about was different, I believe, from the other topics that you're going to find in the publication. And it's something that I feel strongly about. And I feel like it's something that is not talked about enough in this field, which I guess seems to be my niche, right? At things that aren't really talked about or looked at. I'm an outside of the box fringe
Now, how do
researcher.
you be the fringe in the fringe?
The fringe of the fringe. Yeah.
Hey, but
The
that's the
weird of
place
the
to
weird.
be.
Um,
That's where it
but
really is. That's the place to be.
that's where the party's at.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to be different in this community. It is.
Oh yeah.
That's tough.
Just
You
go
know,
look for
so
Bigfoot scat. That'll be enough.
right. Um, but the piece that I wrote about is something that is near and dear to me. I've learned a lot about trauma because I've learned a lot about dealing with my own. Initially, I did intend on becoming a Z-list internet celebrity, but that's because I wanted to motivationally speak to people. Like I said, that's how it's all started, was because I had a superpower, I wanted to use it. And I still use it for the paranormal. The piece that I had written about was essentially about, I had kind of looked into studies, there's a lot of studies out there about people who experience trauma who tend to later go on in life to have what they call a fantasy prone personality. And, in those cases, then those people believe really crazy things. Some of them believe they were abducted by aliens. Some of them believe that their homes are always haunted. Some of them believe that, they see Bigfoot or whatever. They've got these, they're usually spiritual people like us. They're usually like us. Um, but the side of it that they don't talk about, because I do believe that there are people who have a fantasy prone personality and that their experiences may not actually be real. I've talked to people that I think genuinely believe what they're saying,
Oh
but
yes.
I know it's just not, just like you said, my dad shot Bigfoot. You know what? There could be an instance where somebody thought that their dad shot Bigfoot, but their dad didn't shoot Bigfoot. They shot their mom in front of them, which turns into something else.
That would make a lot
Um,
of sense. Yes.
yes, I know people that have seen very traumatic things that they were told later on in life were just traumatic instances, but they believe it was something else. And so there is something to that. But what science doesn't look at, what these psychologists don't look at, is the flip side of that. The example that I used in my piece was about a man who grew up with pretty minimal, some religious interference, just a basic Christian household, nothing crazy, but just normal, relatively good family life, good upbringing, good job, ends up marrying, has kids, and ends up believing that they were abducted by a UFO later in life. And then that experience, which, I think the Christian aspect of it is important because aliens don't really work with Christianity, so they didn't have any predisposition to believe in this stuff. But that experience then caused trauma to happen in their life.
Hmm.
They're not really looking at the backwards of that situation. I do believe that some people can experience a paranormal and it causes a traumatic event to happen and it causes you to have a type of PTSD, which then bleeds out into the whole rest of your life. And
Wow. And yeah, exactly. If you can nail it down to some criminal act that was done to you, or you were in a war, or something like that,
right.
that's much more. And it's not easy to deal with, but it's a different level than if you think you were abducted by aliens. I mean, you're going to have a hell of a tough time finding a counselor that can talk with you
That
on
can,
that.
yeah, that can deal with
You
that.
know,
And one thing that I ask people, all of my witnesses every time, and this is why I get to know them. This is why, because I ask them, have you ever experienced any physical or emotional trauma in your life? And the answer is always yes. It has never been no. Sometimes it's no
wow,
initially until we get to know each other a little bit more. Then eventually they go, well,
it kind of open up. Yeah.
this happened, right? People aren't always willing to talk about the trauma, and that's normal, but they will say, they'll add that in there. They don't normally because they're worried, that it'll be perceived as bad. I had an experience that was perceived as bad. I talk about it on the Patreon. when I was like between like 11, 12 years old. I saw what I called a leprechaun, okay, in a bathroom of a Meyer grocery store, which is just
Oh God, yes, I
a
remember
grocery
this
store.
episode. It was wonderful. Go ahead.
Yep. And I disclosed it to my parents, and that got me a schizophrenia diagnosis. And as an adult now, I know that I don't have schizophrenia. Trust me, I've been to enough doctors to know this.
And
I know
schizophrenia has very specific symptoms that
it
no,
does. Yeah.
seeing leprechauns one time ain't one of them.
Right.
That's
And
not.
at the time I was a kid, I called it a leprechaun because that's what I thought I saw. It was just more like a small man, kind of like a garden gnome-ish type. I don't even know exactly what I saw. It ran so fast in front of me in the bathroom that I really couldn't catch any details. And I was a kid. I was scared, so I left. Of course, who wouldn't, and but it had a lot of negativity to it. And I did not tell that story until I told it on my Patreon to anybody ever, because there was so much. Because after that point, again, I got called crazy. I mean, for real, really crazy. I was put into a mental house, in a mental asylum, and locked away, and that was very traumatizing to me.
Which
um
the cure is worse than the experience.
yes,
You know,
exactly. Exactly, it was
I mean,
horrible.
okay, worst case scenario, she saw something that wasn't there. Okay,
Oh,
maybe we
right.
could deal with that in a more calm and nurturing way than we need to take your shoelaces so you don't kill yourself type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I cried every day, all the time. I hated it there. And and then just on top of that, being a kid, and I'd been a kid my entire life, that I would say things, I would try to reach out, I would try to get help for other things that had been going on, and I was always not believed. And even into adulthood, I had a big falling out. I mean, just to get, I guess I'll get a little deeper, but I had a big falling out with my mom at one point, and she tried to tell me that specific thing that you're saying did not happen, and it wasn't that, it was something else. And I just told her, I was like, you are not going to tell me that I didn't experience what I know I experienced, because I have to live with it now. And just because you live in denial because you don't want to believe you were a bad parent doesn't mean that I have to. And so it really was a pivotal point in my life, not just with the fact that I saw a little person in the bathroom, but it was a pivotal point in my life just because of everything else that was going on. So and that's me even now. I mean, again, I just told that story within the last 6 months of my life, and I've been doing this research for since 2019 is when I started. And I know how that sounds too. I mean, I get it. Yes, it benefits me to tell these great stories because you're going to go listen to them behind my paywall, and that's great. But like, this is something that actually happened.
I I listened to that episode and I had no doubt that you were telling an actual experience as it occurred to you in real time. That no.
It was
Um
wild.
the only thing I think we like exchanged messages about which is trashier, Walmart or Myers, but that's
Yes.
there.
Oh yeah.
But I had no doubt that no, this is not something made up. This is
No, it
a real
happens.
experience. Yes,
And
yes.
I forgot about, I mean, that's another thing. I completely forgot about this. I didn't remember it until just this past year. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. This huge thing that happened in my life, because that's what trauma does to the brain. It affects the brain in such a very interesting way. And maybe I'm not hitting anything right on the mark right now with that, but there is some tie there between those two things. There is. There's a
Oh
tie between
yes.
trauma and the paranormal, and I'm sick of us not talking about it.
Oh yes. I mean, it's that I couldn't confer more. I mean, whether it's the bizarre things they did with MK Ultra,
Hmm.
which involved inflicting a lot of trauma on innocent people,
Oh yeah.
or whether it's, just all the different reports, it does seem like, and I don't want to make it sound like a good thing because it's not, but it does seem, and I'm just talking here, just two friends talking, but it
Sure.
almost seems like trauma opens certain doors of perception. And that if you look at other cultures that have initiation ceremonies to open those doors, they tend to hurt like hell. They tend in shamanic, you know, traditions and in various indigenous traditions. And since once upon a time we're all indigenous, uh, old Celtic traditions, the trauma seems to open doors.
Yeah.
And why that is, I don't claim to know, but it does seem like a thing that happens.
Yeah. I'm very early into the research of it, but I am smart enough to know that there is something there. When I think of Bigfoot, I do think of flesh and blood Bigfoot. That's what I think. I think that there is an undiscovered species of ape in North America, and that's what it is. I'm not going to tell you though that somebody that says that I saw Bigfoot and it took 3 steps backwards and disappeared in front of my eyes and then a UFO appeared. I'm not going to tell them that didn't happen because guess what? It probably did. Um, because I think that that entity is separate from the Bigfoot that we know here on land. I think that
I think
these
you really hit
things,
something there that
yeah,
it's not necessarily an either or.
right,
Um, that all of these things, in fact, I would say, yes, all of these things have multiple explanations because they're multiple experiences that
yeah,
sometimes mimic each other.
mm-hmm,
And I
yeah,
would never tell an experiencer that you didn't have that experience because I
yes,
wasn't there. I'm not a witness to it.
right,
I wasn't sitting next to her. I don't know. If
exactly, yeah,
if you felt that this happened, you really a sincere person, not somebody else, but because there are people who literally go
they just,
on
yeah, they do it for the attention.
Facebook and say, "Yeah, I shot Wolf Man, or I shot Dog Man. I can tell you where the body's buried." Shut up, dude.
And
You
you're like, okay,
didn't.
show me. Well, I can't. Why
Okay,
would I show you? I don't have anything to prove. I know.
exactly. And that, yeah, I'll take that for what it's worth. Okay, that didn't happen. But a
Right,
sincere person who tells me some bizarre thing, I will never tell you that that didn't happen
right,
because for you, that did happen.
yeah.
Now, what somebody from the outside might have been seeing, like I'm thinking of Pascagoula, Alabama. Does that sound familiar?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Where these bizarre fucking aliens, okay? I mean, they look sort of like potatoes, you might say, with hands. I mean, they're
Yes.
really weird. Okay, they're not even humanoid.
No.
And some I can't source this, but something absolutely, if I recall correctly, something absolutely tells me that the fishermen who were abducted at Pascagoula were on camera when this happened. And the camera didn't show a spaceship or aliens, but that doesn't mean they didn't have that experience.
I don't
And
think they were on camera. They were recorded in, I just know this because we did an
oh,
episode on
great.
it.
Yes, please.
They were recorded they went to go report it to the police, and when they were in
Yes.
the interrogation room, they weren't talking about it like, oh, what's your story? And let's get this. They were talking about it like it was 1000% real, like it actually happened. Um, but another way, a different way to put that, what we were talking about earlier with the Chicago Mothman sightings, where people saw this thing in a heavily populated Chicago, but other people did not see it at all.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Exactly.
that
It,
does happen.
exactly. And perception may occur at very different levels.
It can get distorted. Now, the only way that we know that perception can get distorted, what we can replicate consistently, is through trauma. So, what is it that's happening when you have these very strange experiences? Is it that having the experience just in and of itself is causing something traumatic for you? A lot of people talk about these things being interdimensional. I like Keel's term, ultra terrestrial. I love it. I think that's great. I'm going to use that. And
Same here.
love that one. Basically, when people think of interdimensional, they think of like the normal person thinks of like Rick and Morty. Doesn't work that way. Right. It's not.
You're right. It's just, I never
Yes,
thought of it that way before, but yes, that
that's what
is
they
it.
think of, right? You shoot your portal gun, you just walk through the door, and you're on the other side. Doesn't work that way. Dimensions are different degrees of perceptions that we have. Okay, and you master those perceptions. We are third dimensional creatures. We have mastered the perception of width, length, and depth. When you get to, and I'm not going to get into a big tangent about it, but when you get to the fourth dimension is time. So when you can perceive time not in a linear way, but in an entire overview scope. And when you are fourth dimensional, if you were to be fourth dimensional, you would master time. If humans ever time traveled, if we ever do invent time travel, I don't believe we can, and this is why. If we did invent time travel, that means we would have evolved to master time. We would have evolved to a fourth dimensional creature. Um, we would just surpass what we can do now. So these
And
other
if I
beings,
may just put in,
yeah,
I, there I have to agree to disagree because I kind of believe we do at some point develop time travel. And the thing is, if we develop it 1,000 years from now, or 10,000 years from now, or however long, it's always here because we can go back. And I just feel some things are caused by time travelers going back and adjusting things. That is just my perception. But,
that's okay. That's a good That's an okay
you know,
perception to have. I don't think we ever invent it because I don't think as a species we will ever make it that far. Not that we couldn't, but that we will kill ourselves before we can, unless something somewhere else steps in and create and makes it so that we don't destroy ourselves. Which we are trying to do by colonizing other planets, trying to leave and go somewhere else and continue. But doesn't matter. Even if we do or if we don't, if we were to master time travel, we would become fourth dimensional creatures at that point. These other things within the paranormal are, people call them interdimensional. That just means that again, they master the perception of utilizing these other dimensions. They can use them and we cannot. So when they come here and they visit us and they have an experience with us, is it that our brain is not made to perceive their dimensional being, so therefore we don't actually see them as they are? Is it that they can appear however they want to be? Or is it that our brain, because it freaks out and doesn't know what to do, then recodes it using trauma, the same thing that we do with trauma, and makes it whatever? You're already prone to seeing a Bigfoot. If you see a Bigfoot get on a spaceship in the middle of the woods, maybe it's because that's what you expected to see, and that's the most logical thing your brain can come up with. Um,
that makes a
Maybe
lot
it's
of
not,
sense to me that
you
they
know.
can appear to us in a form that we can accept. That if they showed us their actual form, if they even have an actual form,
Yeah.
other than like a floating sphere, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, if you don't have a physical body, and let's say you're just like a floating ball of light, well, then you can pick anything to look like.
Yeah.
And you'd probably pick something out of people's brains that they can relate to.
They can
And
grasp. Yeah.
yes, I haven't had many sightings, but I had one. And I think I've talked with you about it. I'm not sure, but I saw a bear, but it wasn't like an actual bear. It was in a place where bears don't live. Okay. And it
Okay.
was, you know, they're so rare that the next year, this happened in 2019. In 2020, a bear got loose in Richland County, Wisconsin, and it was so rare it made the news. And that
Okay.
was just a black bear that, was a physical black bear. This thing was the size of a small car, and it was multicolored in a way that bears aren't. It does not exist in nature. And I only saw it for a few seconds, but I saw it. And fortunately, my wife was sitting next to me and she saw something too. But she saw Bigfoot.
Huh.
And she described it in detail as looking kind of like the orangutan in the Planet of the Apes movies, like the new
Okay.
ones, not the
Okay.
70s one, the new ones. Yeah. And, but we both saw something at the same time. And I think we both had the impression that what we saw didn't want to be seen.
Yeah.
This was not, I'm coming to you to tell you something. This was, we somehow rolled up on it accidentally. And it was just hauling ass to get away. And it was the steep hills of that area, and it came it came running very fast out of a cornfield and went about 100 yards up a steep hill where it had to kind of hop to get up the hill, and then disappeared into a wooded area. And I what we perceived, I don't think is what really happened. But
Whatever
it
it
was,
was, right?
yeah, it was taking images from our minds that we could handle.
Right.
And it looked like this. Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
what it looked
creating that.
like.
Well, and some people have, maybe some listeners are familiar with the knot deer. It's kind of a controversial creature. Some people hate it. But I mean, God, isn't that exactly what this phenomena is? It's just a deer that looks off. Isn't that what the men in black are?
Hey, is the not deer the ones that walk on their hind legs or something?
They can. Sometimes it's just deers that like their eyes are too close together. Or they'll have like instead of like having the small deer tail, they'll have really, really long dog tails, or they're just usually slightly off. Some people expand on it. I did have a report of somebody seeing a like a it was like a reverse centaur. So it was like a deer top with a man bottom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which who knows? What is it a bullshit story? I don't know.
I
Um
I won't dismiss it. No.
Sure, right, exactly. I wasn't there, so I don't, I don't know.
Just to say,
Um,
did you ever see the movie Ritual?
I have not.
Okay, because it's got something like that in that, but I don't want to wreck it. Go ahead.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, right. So like I said, you've got these experiences, and yeah, even the Men in Black, right? They're not. They look kind of human, but they look weird, and they don't act really good. They're not
They're
good at being
always
humans.
intentionally odd.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
and
sometimes they're
so
like bloodless or mechanical or something that's not. They're appearing to try to show us a symbol that we're going to respond to,
they're like
but
trying
they're
really
off.
hard.
Yeah.
It's like if you took an animal and transformed it into a human for a day, and it would like your dog, and it would like try to replicate like what you do, but it's not good at it because it's never had hands.
Yes. Well, I was thinking, and this is like something that they actually do when they're training birds, the sandhill cranes. They don't want them to get attached to people. So they have like a puppet sandhill crane mother
Yeah,
that feeds them,
yeah,
but it's a person behind a mask with a glove
right.
feeding them.
Yeah,
So it looks like what their mother would look like, but they don't
right.
have mothers. But it's a guy behind a mask,
Yeah.
and it's good enough to fool small birds. And then later, when they take them down to Florida, they fly it's like an ultralight, and it looks like a full grown sandhill crane, so that they won't follow people, they'll follow their own kind.
Oh my
But
gosh.
it's manipulation using costumes.
Right, but we
And
can tell it's not the same thing, right?
yes, we can tell. It doesn't seem like they can tell, but it does in all of this scripted stuff. It seems like something, for lack of a better term, above us is using the mask and the puppets
Yeah.
and the to manipulate us,
Yeah. Exactly.
which
Exactly. And
is
like I said, I just feel like that aspect of it isn't talked about enough,
no,
people are arguing about flesh and blood and interdimensional and this, that, and the other. Well, guess what, guys? You can have both, and it's
both and
valid.
probably several more,
Yeah, right. Exactly. We don't know. We're pretty darn advanced, right? We are a pretty darn advanced species, but when we really compare ourselves to the scope of just the observable universe right now, we're very small. We haven't been around very long at all. Even compared to things on our own planet, we haven't been around very long at all. So we still have a long way to go.
I
You
heard
know,
the most amazing statistic the other day that the timeline between the earliest dinosaurs and the last dinosaurs is so much more vast than between the last dinosaurs and us today.
yeah,
The
yeah,
dinosaurs were here for like ever.
yeah,
And we're recent newcomers.
yeah,
Like comparatively, a million years ago, our common ancestor was like a squirrel. Okay. It
Yeah.
was like this little monkey thing that ran around, and yeah, that became us over time. But the dinosaurs were here for tens of millions of hundreds of millions of years.
Right.
And
And
yeah,
that's
we're
just our
still,
planet, and like I said, we're new. We're
let
very, very
alone
new.
whatever else might be out there. Yes.
Right. Yes. And so, I mean, we just, people think that we are so important and we're not. As sad as it is, we are important individually. Don't get me wrong, you
Oh,
have your
yes,
place.
yes.
But as a collective, we are just very, I mean, that's my theory on it. We're so very infantile. And that's why people are like, well, if the aliens are visiting, why don't they just make themselves known? Why don't they just, well, why would they? We're like insects to them, if that, microbes maybe. Why would they? What's the point? I do the entered cold research, and of course I've asked that question to Tanya Derenberger.
Who you
Why
have a
doesn't
fascinating relationship with. That is really interesting to me.
I do. But I ask her all the fun questions that, nobody thinks to ask. And it's like, and I know what people are doing, and I agree with it. They're trying to catch her off guard. When's his birthday? And she'll tell you. Shouldn't think about it for a second. I think it's coming up. It's sometime in February.
Okay.
Um, and so but she'll just tell you. So I ask her all the weird stuff. I ask, why doesn't he just make himself known? And she's like, well, why would he? The only reason why he comes here now is because him and my dad made a friendship, and he's watched us kids grow up, and so he's got emotion. He's not emotionless. But why would he come forward? We're terrible. Humans are awful. What would the point be?
If I may make an analogy, there's an island off of India where it's a very specific place, and everybody's banned from going there. And the Indian police tell you, we will not protect you if you go there. Do not go there. Sometimes missionaries show up there anyway. It never ends well.
Yeah, I know what you're
Okay.
talking about. Yeah.
They kill everybody who arrives. If you
Everybody. Yeah.
show up on the beach, they will murder you immediately.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And once upon like a decade or maybe 20, 30 years ago, a ship washed up there and they killed everybody
Yeah.
instantly. And a couple of years ago, a guy went there to, I think, kind of think at some level he maybe wanted to be a martyr because he showed up to bring the gospel to them and they killed him within hours. And if you go there, they're going to kill you. That's what's going to happen. And they made arrowheads out of the metal of the ship of the people they killed. Okay. You cannot go there because they're just hyper violent. I think probably other civilizations see the earth kind of that way.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
like, I mean, into that right this minute, we're, I'm not saying there's going to be a nuclear war. I don't think there will be,
No.
but it's not off the table either. And, do you want to show up there? Probably not. It's probably kind of like what the 1950s contactees were saying. Get your own shit together, and then you can get a seat at the table, and
Right.
we'll like talk with you once you're done killing each other for no apparent reason.
Yeah. Yeah. We're still at the kids' table. We're not.
Yes, yes.
you know, we're not ready for the coffee and the gossip yet. That's just the way. Yeah, I mean, that's that. I think that as well. I mean, I think that we're just not terribly important. We're interesting. We're interesting enough, to want to take some type of interest in. But now that we're growing up a little bit, okay, like when your teenager gets a car, right? So your kid is at home, and then suddenly now, guess what? Now they're the world's problem. And we are hitting that teenage stage. And this, I do have a theory as for disclosure and kind of why that's happening now.
Oh,
Um,
please.
I think that as we are starting to expand more and look at space research a little bit more, when we started talking about colonizing another planet, I do feel like whatever is out there, whatever has been watching us, and I don't think it's like one species. I think there's multiple different types of quote unquote alien life out there. Um, they're worried because if we do that, if what we do ends up being, well, we've destroyed this planet, let's just go to a new one. We've now become planet eaters. And what we're
Yes.
going to do is continue to travel around the different planets, ruining them. And, we could probably destroy our own planet and get away with it. But when we start going around different I mean, it sounds very sci-fi, but
Oh
really,
no,
if
I
you
that makes a lot of sense to me.
if you
I
hop around, you start destroying these other planets, you're destroying the ecosystem that's happening in space. And this higher intelligence is not about to have that. They're not. They're not going to let us sit at the adult table.
until we get it together, yes.
Yeah. And
I
they're going to
have
stop us.
a somewhat similar theory that the biblical story of the Tower of Babel is really a story of a space program that was stopped. That the plan by humans to build a tower that shall rise into heaven, and then God, but God in the translation is plural,
Sure.
uh, breaks that up and says, no, that's not going to happen. You're not coming
Hmm.
up here.
Yeah.
And the statement by God before the Elohim scatter the people is if we let them, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but
Sure.
if we let them build this tower, they will come up and be like us.
Yeah.
And no, we're not letting that happen.
Yeah.
And so they take action and scatter the peoples of the world. And that to me just screams this was a space program a long time ago by our terms. And other beings stepped in and said, you're not ready to have a space program. Because
Not yet.
all you want to do is pillage and wreck stuff.
Yeah.
And no, come back when you're more agreeable.
Yeah. Stop keeping slaves and not letting the women vote. I
Yes,
mean,
yes. Human sacrifice,
right. Get the basics
a
together.
number of things. Yes,
We'll
yes.
talk about it. And we're getting there. As a civilization, clearly we're progressing into a
Oh,
more peaceful
yes.
people. I know people are like, what's bad? The world just gets worse every day. Actually, it's not. The world's getting
No, it
better every day.
doesn't.
It's just that with the internet, you're exposed to the bad more than you were before.
Yes. And
Um, you know,
anybody who doubts that, and I thank you for saying that because I so often hear all this crap
the
about
world's
now
going to
is the
hell in a
worst,
handbasket.
everything's the worst it's ever been.
Yeah.
Really? So it was better 100 years ago?
Yeah, it wasn't.
Really? Was it? I don't think it was. Watch 13 Years a Slave and tell me that things were better in the past.
Yeah.
Okay. Look at, when women got the right to vote. Just to vote, let
Yeah.
alone have your own bank account or, God forbid, a career or something. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
if you have the good fortune to have elderly relatives, just talk with how things were when they were your age. And yeah. And for those of us who happen to be a white man, such as myself, it was better for me. Have you been drafted, dude? Did you
Right.
get okay? Because let me tell you, I have two great uncles. Well, they were both deceased, but one got drafted for World War II and got drafted again for Korea. Okay,
Oh
um,
no.
getting drafted was just like a thing that happened, and
Yeah.
you know that w- life has improved a great deal in the last century
Yeah.
and in the preceding time, and
Yeah.
it's getting better. It really
Yeah.
is.
It's not
You know.
perfect. We still got a ways to
Oh
go.
no, no, we've got a lot of stuff to do,
I
but
know.
it's
But
it's
it's getting
still
better.
better.
Yeah. It's
And
it's
if
better
I
than it was 20 years ago.
oh, absolutely.
When I look at my daughter and look at the position she's in school and things like that and how the kids kind of work now, it didn't work that way when I was a kid, it was worse then.
Bullying
But
is now not a sport, so
yeah, right.
yes, yes.
It's
I
it's
could,
very
yeah.
interesting. But yeah, it's not getting worse. People think that we are slowly progressing. But what's going to happen first? Are we going to kill ourselves first? Are we going to come under attack? Are these things going to have to reveal themselves so that way we don't fuck up their lives like we have ours? What's going to happen? Well, we don't know. Maybe I'll
We
ask the
don't
tarot
know.
cards. Maybe they will. They'll
And
tell me.
we've probably run out our time to a little bit. Um,
This happens every time I come on.
but yes, and I'm gonna have to have you back again so we can, handle a few more issues because I never even got into talking about Ouija boards or using occult means to summon paranormal entities,
Yeah.
or several other things I wanted to touch on with you, but we've been here a couple hours and I probably have to wrap things up a little bit. But
Yeah, it's a school night. I understand.
yes, indeed. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Um, sure. Yeah, you can follow me on the internet. I'm Ashley Hilt on Facebook. I'm the one with the red hair. I'm also at It's Ashers with a Z on Twitter and Instagram. And you can listen to my podcast on Wednesdays. We talk weird. It's very adult, but I'm assuming that you are here listening to this as an adult.
I've
But
been
it's fun.
drinking beer this whole time, so I mean,
You have. Yes, you have.
I don't
See,
make the same kind of jokes that your co-host does, but yeah, it's not the kids' table, okay,
no, it's not the kids' table. No, that's not even the adults' table. That's the room at the video store, the adult room in the video store. That's my show, but the information's good and accurate.
Oh yes, it's wonderful. And I will tell everybody who's listening, if you're not a Patreon of Ashley Hilt here, you should be, because it's totally worth it. And just the weird stuff you've been doing with the states, like weird
Yeah, that's been
Delaware
fun.
and weird
Yeah,
Florida, that has kicked ass. It's fascinating.
yeah.
And yeah, it's absolutely worth the price of a Happy Meal that it costs to be a Patreon. So go do that. Yes.
Well, thank you. Wow, Happy Meals are that expensive now? I believe it.
Buy one
No.
of those adult Happy Meals. They're like $9. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yes,
Ooh, where have
yes.
I been? I missed out on my mutated grimace. So
Yeah, they all look so weird. They all have like four eyes. I don't know what the hell, man. I bought a couple of them. Yeah, I did that. But it's a far better use of your couple of $8 or something
yeah.
to be a Patreon and to get the full access, because it's well worth it by all
Thank
means.
you. Yeah, I try to post different, get some evidence of things, or there's some videos, things like that, phone calls of witnesses that I've talked to and recorded. I mean, there is like evidence on there as well that you're not going to get just following me on social media. Not that anything is a smoking gun. Trust me, if there was a smoking gun, I'd show everyone. But it is interesting. Definitely expand your perspective a little bit. And yeah, just come for the Weird World series. It's a new episode every month on the Patreon, and we talk about the different. Right now, we're just going through all 50 states alphabetically because it's easy and simple, and just talk about the different things you can do and see and experience in the different states. So,
Oh yeah, it's cool as hell, man. Yeah. Um, well, hey, thank you for being here tonight, Ashes. I really appreciate it. It's been an excellent episode, and I've got to have you back because we got more stuff to talk about.
I'll come back. You got to get me that jacket, though. That's
You'll be in the first handful of people to get
that'll be my next show. The
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 merch. We
inauguration
haven't we haven't
of the
hit the
jacket.
merch yet, but we're
Right.
we're not far from hitting it.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been great. Um, folks, thank you for listening. This has been The Weird Part. I'm Vincent Trewell. My special guest was Ashley Hilt. Thank you for listening, and good night.